he said it was okay with him, but it could get back to some of you guys did or some of you in action. So is that all right with everybody that we have it on video? Oh, just wanted to make sure before we started. So anyway, I know most of you are here because you have the 40 hour, you want to do, have to have 8-hour HAZWOPER every year. And today's class, I had talked to Seth earlier in the year and last year too, and we thought it'd just be a little bit better to have a more hands-on kind of less book reading kind of class because, you know, we didn't want to, you know, this kind of second class we've had since we've been really back to having class in person. And we didn't want to have a webinar, we wanted to have it in person. So today's classes are going to be more, you know, show and tell kind of hands-on classes. So I think that'll be better. And we're going to record it. So if there's anything that you forget or need to look at, just get on the ITEC website. It should be on there. Absolutely put on this weekend. And a couple things. Everybody knows where the restrooms are down here on the left. You need to go out there. I already told you about there's water back there and the back there. Oh, by the way, I'm Sean. I forgot. I should have been. I thought everybody knew me, but just have to share my Sean. One, come on in. Sign in for us, please. I'm just giving the introduction. So now you have to take over and realize that.
You've been told to share too, by the way.
Yeah, that's not who it is. Now, usually they make me talk on everything, so it's fair, because usually when you talk, you don't have to do it very long, and then you have to do the other stuff next time. But anyway, I thought, before we start the actual presentation and stuff, let's go around and just introduce everybody. I know most of everybody, but I know some of you don't. And, you know, I always hate sending out emails and text messages to people when I don't really know who they are. I know who they are, casually see them at the conference or something. And I think it would be nice, so we don't have a lot here, if we just go around and introduce yourself, say where you're from in case we see you again. And we better see you again at the ITEC conference, because that's coming up here next month. So I'm putting in a plug for it. It's all set up on the site to register for the ITEC conference, and the hotel and everything is ready to go for registration. So, and it's going to be at the Hard Rock. So get on there and register for it. If you, we've got some really good sessions. We're just about done with the agenda. We're gonna maybe have something sort of like this too. Hopefully, we're gonna try to make it a little more less. What's the word I'm looking for? Less scholastic and more entertaining. So, sign up for that. Okay, let's start over here with Jason. Everybody knows him. He's like me. Jason.
Good morning, I'm Jason Meyer with Cherokee Nation's Environmental Programs.
And I'm Laura Downing with Cherokee Nation Environmental Programs.
I'm Preston Collier with Potawatomi Environmental Programs.
Brad, with Cherokee Nation Environmental Programs.
Justin Burrow, Eastern Shawnee Tribe Environmental.
Justin Moran, Eastern Shawnee.
The Justin section back there.
Mexico with the Boone Creek Nation Environmental Services.
Autumn Deer with Muskogee Creek Nation Environmental Services.
Good morning, I'm Karen Dye with Cherokee Nation.
Donna Prentice with Atchison, Oklahoma. Orla Dartson from Kiowa Tribe.
I'm Sheila Settles for home with Cherokee Nation.
Christy Lawson, Muskogee Creek Nation Environmental.
Ashley Wagner with Cherokee Nation.
Okay, and like I said, I'm Sean West, and this morning we're going to have a speaker from the Cherokee Nation Risk Management. His name is Seth Arnold. Seth, can you kind of tell him what you do? I'm not exactly sure. I don't really work on that. You do a lot of things, so I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief summary. So like Sean said, my name is Seth Arney. Can y'all hear me fine in the back? Okay, awesome. So my name is Seth Arney. I'm with Risk Management, and I'm in loss control. The Risk Management carries the insurance for the tribe, but with that, on the loss control side, we're basically there to try and ensure that Cherokee Nation doesn't suffer any losses. So whether that be through personal injuries, which is going to result in a workers' comp claim, property damage. So we go out and we do annual building inspections. We just look for anything that may result in a loss there. So safety concerns with employees and building issues. And then to auto. So our office office runs motor vehicle reports. There is a driving thing you have to fill out. It's on a point system, so if you've gotten too many, got too many tickets or accidents, things like that, could affect your driving at work. So if you're over the point system, then you're not allowed to drive at work. So it's kind of things like that, but basically to put it in a nutshell, it's safety for the most part. We're out here, we've got a ton of construction going on right now, Cherokee Nation does. So we're out there on those sites daily, doing safety out there, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, wearing proper PPE and those things. And then two, we get reports for all of our injuries, employees, and then we have to go out and do accident investigations on those as well. So that's kind of a brief summary of what we do in risk management and more specifically loss control. But like I said, name's Seth Arney. Today, we're going to go to fire extinguisher training. We're going to do that first. As soon as we go through this PowerPoint, I'll turn this around. We'll do the hands-on. And whenever you come up here for that, just sign this there's two sign-in sheets here, rather, one for each class. If you don't mind, just sign that before you do the hands-on. At any point, if you guys got any questions, please feel free to stop and ask me, raise your hand, or just ask. I mean, I don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Like Sean said, I'm really glad that we're back to doing this in person. It's so much better being able to see people and get feedback. I mean, these work a lot better if it's more kind of like a conversation rather than me just up here reading, and that's what I always feel like it turns into on a webinar for sure, is just me reading. It's hard to ask people questions through webinar because people don't know how to operate the mic, how to mute it and whatnot. You're always getting a lot of feedback, so I think this will be good. We'll go ahead and get started. If I get my clicker to work. So what we're going to cover in this training, we're going to go over the purpose, different fire elements, different fire classifications, different types of portable fire extinguishers, talk about the pass method, that's on how to use a fire extinguisher, service and maintenance, storage, go over some SDS information very briefly, fire inhalation injuries, and then lastly finish with some fire prevention information. So the purpose, this is workplace fire, can happen anytime. It's important to know when and how to fight a fire and when not to. And I want to add, this is all geared and it says Cherokee Nation. I know you are Cherokee Nation employees, but this is our training. So you can disregard that part. And to, I mean, a lot of this is going to apply at home as well. So just know that. But workplace fire at any time, when fire starts, like I said, it's important to know when and how to fight it and when not to. So that last part, pretty important as well. Let's say we're coming through this glass door right here. Well, let's use this door because you can see through the glass door. Let's say you come through this door. This entire room's engulfed in flames. There's smoke everywhere. The ceiling tiles are falling. Are you going to go back out there and try to grab a fire extinguisher and fight that fire? No, I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. No, that's the right answer. I want to tell people this is not the Firefighter Academy. This is just basic information on how to use an extinguisher. Don't put yourself in danger. You should only fight a fire when it's in its beginning stages. So something that's relatively small. I usually use a trash can, for example, because there's usually always a trash can in the room. But something like that, hopefully after this training, everyone will feel comfortable grabbing an extinguisher and trying to fight a small fire. But this training is provided, once again, it says Cherokee Nation employees, but whoever with the basic information need to react safely in a potentially dangerous situation. So like I said, at the end of the day, don't put yourself in danger. And also to know at the end of the day, ultimately that's your decision and your choice. So only do it if you feel comfortable doing so. But hopefully after this, everyone at least feel comfortable with how to operate one and try to fight a small fire. Here's some statistics on fires in the U.S. These are pulled from 2021. There should be coming out with some more this year, but I looked, wow, it was probably about a month ago and they hadn't put them out yet. The NFPA hadn't updated these, but they really haven't fluctuated much, at least in the last 4 years since it's been updating this. There was 1,353,500 fires reported. That number stays pretty constant. 14,700 injuries. That one too is usually within 1,000. 3,800 deaths. Same thing, pretty constant. The only one that sees significant change is property damage, and it does tend to fluctuate quite a bit. Some years it'll jump by several billion, and some years it'll drop. I'm assuming a big part of that's going to be a lot of those wildfires in California that burning really expensive homes. I imagine that has a pretty big impact on it. because that's the only one that does fluctuate quite a bit of property damage. What that means though, if you're to take those numbers, average it out, break it down, keep in mind, this is the entire US. But a fire department responds to a fire every 23 seconds, and injury occurs every 36 minutes, and then a death every 2 hours and 18 minutes. So to put that in perspective, fire is very common. I mean, just already from the time I started talking, you're looking at numerous fires responded to. By the time we get done with this, you're looking at an injury, and if you think of the workday or the entire time y'all are gonna be here, you're looking at multiple deaths. So fires in the US are very common. All right, then fires have 3 elements for it to occur. You want to tell me what those 3 elements are?
Fuel.
Yep, fuel's one. Oxygen. We were on the heater right there. Fuel, oxygen,
Ignition.
yep, ignition, spark, heat source, something to get it all going. What the fire extinguisher is gonna do, it's gonna remove one or more of those elements to extinguish that fire. And here in a minute, we'll start talking about different types of extinguishers and how they work to extinguish those fires. All right, then into the different fire classifications, there's A, B, C, D, and then don't ask me why, but it skips to K. Does anybody know what a class A fire is? And I'm asking for the material or the fuel that's being burnt in that fire. You go ahead. Yeah, wood is gonna fall right there, so it's gonna be ordinary combustibles. We do the same thing at A for ash, so any materials that are gonna leave ashes, wood, paper, cloth, things like that. How about B?
Fuels.
Yep, it's big flammable liquids. How about C?
Chemicals.
Yeah, here does electrical equipment. We go back to that flammable liquids, you wouldn't believe how many times I'll try and give a hint and I'll go like this and people will go, water. Happens a lot. But if C there does electrical equipment, how about D?
Metal.
Yep, combustible metals. Firefighter.
I do fire extinguishers.
Oh, good. I don't say.
Sort of hunters.
Give everybody else a chance. I'm about to laugh when someone beside him did. Okay. It's a room in the house.
Kitchen.
Yeah. You just say K for kitchen. This one's gonna say cooking appliances, because that's what it's for, but we just say K for kitchen. It's easier to remember, and that's always where that extinguisher is gonna be at. It's gonna be in the kitchen. And I don't know what all every one of y'all does, but does anyone happen to deal with combustible metals? Okay, good. Because I was gonna say that we don't touch on that anymore because within Cherokee Nation, we don't really, that's not a risk for us. So that's about the only one we're not gonna talk about. But going forward, the different types of extinguishers. First one we're talking about is pressurized water. It is pretty self-explanatory, just water under pressure. It's about like having a souped up garden hose, but you got a pretty limited capacity there. These are not very common. At Cherokee Nation, we don't have any that I know of at any of our properties. But they're only rated for Class A fires. I'll add to every extinguisher on the face of it. If you ever get in a scenario where you don't know what class fire it's rated for, every extinguisher on the face of it should have that little symbol in class. So that'll let you know if you don't know. Some of these are chrome, some of them are red. Kind of depends. A lot of the other ones are more color coded, but these vary. Like I said, not very common, but only rated for Class A fires, which was wood. Yep, wood, paper, cloth, ordinary combustibles. Why would you not want to use this with a Class B fire? What was Class B fire?
Fuel.
Yep, flammable liquids. Yep, water's not gonna mix with it, you're just gonna kind of be spreading stuff around. How about C? Yeah. Well, now that's a pretty big hazard, trying to put water on energized electrical equipment. Same thing on D, though it's not an issue, very dangerous to throw water on a combustible metal fire. And then K, lastly, hopefully everyone as well knows not to try and put water on your kitchen grease fire. That basically makes a smaller explosion. We actually had an incident probably about 2 years ago now, in one of our buildings. There's a kitchen in there, a small kitchen. Well, I say small, it's really kind of narrow. But the lady thought she had a pot of oil that she was getting hot. Or no, I got that. She thought it was a pot of water that was boiling, that it was a pot of oil. And she went to add more water into it. She dumped that water in, it was oil, and they had it on camera. And I mean, just completely engulfed that entire room in flames, just like that. She got burnt pretty bad, but she's lucky it wasn't a lot worse. She did get some pretty bad burns on both of her arms from doing like that immediately. But yes, please, whatever you do, don't try to put water on a kitchen grease fire. Hopefully, if I can get this video to play, I can show an example. But the next extinguisher we're going to talk about, CO2, carbon dioxide, really for class B and C fires. Can someone tell me which element this extinguisher is removing from that fire? You can just sit the rest of this without. Which one of those three elements? Yeah, to be the oxygen. So these aren't all that common either. They're what they call a clean agent, so it's not going to leave behind that white baking soda type residue like your ABC dry chemical. So usually if you do come across one of these, it's going to be somewhere with a lot of electronic equipment like IT closet, computer room, server room, something of that nature. There are a few of them throughout Cherokee Nation, through our properties. Easy way to identify these, that doesn't really show up that well, is that they look a lot like the ABC. They're usually red, but they have much bigger nozzles on them. They'll have those enlarged nozzles, so usually pretty easy to tell from a distance that it's carbon dioxide. Like I said, usually an IT closet, server room, something like that. Because in those areas, whenever, if you have an ABC extinguisher, it gets that powder in there inside the electronic equipment, it does added damage where this one will not. So if you do come across one, generally that's where they're at. The reason why they're not rated for a class A fire, I'm sure everyone in here has had a brush pile, a bonfire, a weenie roast, something like that. We said this one, the main function is removing that oxygen from that fire. You know, a lot of times there'd be coals or embers, sometimes deep down inside there. This extinguisher has a hard time putting out those coals or embers that may be embedded down deep. And so it's hard to remove enough oxygen to put those out. So that's why it's not rated for class A fire. And that's one of the main reasons why you don't see them all that often. It doesn't have that added class A coverage. Most buildings are constructed in ordinary combustible wood, so that's why it's not all that common, other than in IT areas. Next one we're talking about is ABC, probably the most important just because it's the most common. So it's covering 3 out of your 5 main classes. Comes several different sizes. I'm going to say typical for the workplace is generally somewhere between 10 and 20 pounds. Kind of depends on what you've got going on there. But that's usually the size you're going to see at work. You know, if you're in Walmart, see one of these hanging on a pole, it's usually going to be an ABC. That 90% of the time, that's what they are. How many of y'all have extinguishers at home? Oh, wow. Several of y'all. Are they ABC? Kitchen, okay, that's good to have too. So about half y'all have a kitchen. That's really good. What size are they? Yeah, typical for the homes, usually 2.5 to maybe 10. Most people don't have a 10 to have their own. Most of them are 5 pounds. We'll start with 20 pound and work our way down because this one that I have here mimics a 20 pound. So 20 pound extinguisher, that means there's 20 pounds of agent inside there. The extinguisher itself, the actual physical weight, is going to come in somewhere closer between 30 and 35 pounds. That's not exact. That's usually roughly how long it's going to last you in a second. This one right here, it'll last right around 32, 33 seconds. You got a 10 pound, you're looking at 15, 17 pounds, about how long it's going to last you in a second. 5 pound, only going to last you about 7 seconds. You go with a real small 2.5, you're looking at around 3 seconds. So kind of give you an idea of how big or small that fire is gonna have to be for your particular extinguisher to be effective. These are under a lot of pressure, especially some of the larger ones. So something to note there, whenever you go to use one, and where we go do the hands-on, make sure you're grabbing that hose down towards the nozzle. If you got hold of it up high by the handle, set that dude off, that hose will start slinging around on you, so I'm trying to kick your butt. So make sure you're grabbing it down there towards the end. Like I said, under a lot of pressure, they say some of the larger ones have a max range of around 20 feet. I don't think you can put a fire out from that distance. I think that's a pretty good stretch, but main takeaway from that is to make sure you're grabbing that nozzle down towards the end. I don't think I missed anything for now. So the next one we're talking about, Halotron. Just like CO2, also a clean agent. So once again, not very common. Typically gonna be IT server room, computer lab, something with a lot of electronic equipment. So like I said, doesn't do that added damage. And typically, this is what you see in those areas because it has that added Class A coverage where the CO2 didn't. So generally speaking, or at least within Cherokee Nation, in our IT server room, computer lab, things like that, most of the time we have a Halotron. Sometimes we have CO2, but the majority of the time we have Halotron. And the reason why you don't see these hanging up everywhere instead of ABC dry chemical is simply expense. These are very expensive, depending on the size, usually anywhere from $300 to possibly $600 a piece. So that can get very costly very quickly compared to the ABC.
What's the real difference though? Like, is it just the chemical that's in it?
Yeah, that's the difference. As far as its ability, same ability, but yeah, that's the
Well,
difference.
it's about debating.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, just different chemicals.
So this one costs a lot more than the other one. This is the difference.
The Halotron, yes, yeah, they're a lot more expensive than your ABCs. Yeah, a lot more. I mean, you could get an ABC extinguisher for probably $40-50. I mean, it's different size, but $40-50 compared to 300 plus. So big difference there. The last one we're going to talk about is Class K. Let's see if I can get this video to play in a second. You, typically speaking, at least in the workplace, I know some of them at home are a little different. Are y'all's white? The ones that y'all at K? Yeah. A lot of times the smaller ones for home are usually white, but if you're in the workplace, they're usually a little bigger, and every one of them I've seen has always been chrome. Something to add on these, this is one of those where it is beneficial to look at the front of these, because some of them are rated for Class K only, and then some of them are Class A and K. So some of them are ordinary combustibles plus your kitchen grease fires and cooking appliances, some strictly cooking appliances. So that's really good information to know. These not under a ton of pressure like that ABC. Whoever sprays out, comes out kind of in a cone shape, almost mist-like. What it does, sprays out a foam. Once that makes contact, it'll begin to foam and swell up. Basically, it creates a foam blanket on that surface. Doesn't allow any oxygen down to it, suffocates the fire that way. These are extremely effective for your kitchen grease fires, and some of them have the added Class A coverage. If I can get this video to play, this is someone demonstrating one, and then also showing you what happens if you put water in the kitchen grease fire. Something showing up.
Keep talking, I'll get asked to become in that.
Well, it said my video is not available anymore, so
We could probably work something out, make it work.
if it's not, it's no big deal. We'll just go on. Like I said,
We can play it later if you want.
now later though, we'll need that video, but now it's not that big a deal. Like I said, I showed you or explained how it sprays out, and then hopefully everyone already knew, but we already highlighted that story on how dangerous it can be putting water on a kitchen grease fire. So that was mainly just the takeaways from the video. It was only like 40 seconds anyway. But y'all tell me what the PASS method, what that acronym stands for?
On a squeeze, sweep,
Yep, nailed it. What are we pulling?
look, and
You're gonna pull that pin. All extinguishers in the workplace should have a little plastic safety keeper on that pin. That's to ensure that it stays in place and in the event it gets knocked over, someone's tampering with it. That ensures that the pin stays in place so it doesn't accidentally get set off. Those sometimes can be kind of hard to break if you just run up there and you just try and yank that pin straight out. So what we tell people is twist it. If you twist it, from experience, it always breaks super easy. Give it a twist. Go ahead and pull that one out. Then where are you gonna aim?
place the fire.
Yep, at the base of the fire. So right where the flames are meeting that material or that fuel that's being burnt, that's where you need to aim. Squeeze, pretty self-explanatory. We squeeze the handle from the top down, so the bottom part of the handle is stationary. Pick it up, squeeze the top handle down, and then sweep. Wherever you go to sweep and wherever we do the hands-on, just a nice, steady, controlled motion. Don't get up there and get excited and start wailing around. Just nice, steady, back and forth motion. Make sure you're really blanketing that fire, especially with the hands-on, make it a lot easier to put out. Several things here. So if you're outside, always make sure you're upwind. You don't want those flames blowing toward you while you're trying to fight that fire. Always maintain eye contact with the fire, so don't take your eyes off of it for any reason. Good starting distance. It's ultimately going to depend on the exact scenario, situation, layout of where the fire is, things like that. But say anywhere from 8 to 12 feet. Main takeaway, you don't want to run right up 1, 2 feet away, especially with that ABC extinguisher on, especially if it's in the corner of a room or something like that. You're going to blow either those materials possibly back on yourself, or more than likely, you're going to at least get that agent back on yourself from an extinguisher if you're up against a wall or something like that. So start fair distance back, same thing with the hands on, and then you may need to move it closer as you begin to knock that fire down. And then lastly, when we go to the hands on after you've extinguished the fire, I'll let you know just to save time. But in a real life scenario, they say it's best practice to go ahead and empty that extinguisher. So let's say we use the 10-pound extinguisher, for example. How long do we say it's going to last roughly?
10 seconds.
No, 10 pound.
12 seconds.
Yeah, 15. We got there. Yeah, it's around 15 seconds. So let's say there's a fire, trash can, we put it out 3 seconds. They say to go ahead and keep spraying for that next 12 seconds. Two things there. One, it ensures that you did everything you could in that moment to make sure that that fire was out. It wasn't going to come back on you. And second of all, you can't use the extinguisher for 3 seconds and go back and hang it on the wall. It's going to have to be reserviced, recharged. So they say, real life scenario, best practice, go ahead and empty that thing. Yeah, especially at work. So service and maintenance. This is requirement at the workplace to be serviced annually by a licensed company, then inspected monthly by someone there at the facility. So what that person there at the facility is doing, and you don't, just to check these monthly, you don't have to have any kind of certification or anything like that for the monthly checks. What they're doing each month, going around looking for dents, rust, cracks, basically anything that may make the extinguisher inoperable or not function properly. One of the main things they're doing, checking this dial. It's got a little yellow needle that needs to be in the green. If it's to the left, it's undercharged. If it's to the right, it's overcharged. Every extinguisher in the workplace should have a green tag on it. That's so you can verify and note those inspection dates, make sure it's in compliance. Let's set this. But you can see this dial on this one as well. And then if everything looks good, like I said, they'll initial and date on the back of that green tag. How I'm sure you all have them at home, you're not getting them inspected annually, are you? I didn't figure it. Nobody does. I mean, it's not a requirement. But oftentimes we get asked, well, how long is it good for then if I'm not getting it looked at annually? I've always, from everything I looked up, 5 to 15 years, which is a huge gap. So we say to be on the safe side, just go ahead and replace them at home every 5 years. And then if you need somewhere to get rid of them, the majority of the time your local fire department will take them off your hands if you take them down to them. So if you got anything different on that?
No, the only thing I would say is like, if you do invert them every once in a while. to
Yes.
set,
That is good.
it does keep it from just settling and turning into a brick in the bottom
Yeah.
where you pull it and all your propellant comes out.
Yeah, that is a good point. I was actually gonna say, I forgot, but yeah, like you're saying, the extinguisher sat there for a long time, and chemical, all that stuff, it'll just settle on the bottom. So it is a good thing to do every now and then on those monthlies, if you're the person in charge of that, is to just pick them up and just shake them and break that loose, because it will get solid down there and it won't function properly. Storage, the majority of the time is usually one located near an exit. That's in the event that you need that extinguisher to help you escape the building. Has to be easily accessible, so it can't be mounted any higher than 5 feet from the ground to the top of the extinguisher, and then it has to be at least 4 inches off the ground from the ground to the bottom of the extinguisher. That's at least up to 40 pounds. But the majority of the time, it's probably gonna be sitting somewhere about like this one is on this table. It's gonna be mid-level for the majority of people, and the reason being is you don't want it up high. You don't want 6 foot up there where someone couldn't reach it from 1, or 2, they're reaching way up high, it puts you at increased risk of suffering a back injury trying to grab that. And also there's a potential to drop it and hurt yourself, drop it on your foot or whatever. And then same thing with it being on the ground, you just have to bend over, let you increase risk for back injury. So typically speaking though, they're gonna be mounted somewhere right there in that mid-level height for most people. Location of every extinguisher should be marked on your evacuation plans. So if the facility has evacuation plans, the location of those should be marked on there. Always good to know where the nearest extinguisher is from your office or area that you frequent in the building in case something does happen. So like I said earlier, easily accessible. The area in front of them can't be blocked or obstructed from view at any time. That's in the event that you need that extinguisher, you should be able to access it as quickly as possible in the event of emergency. And then you don't want to store it near any real significant source of heat. Anybody don't want?
Because it's under pressure.
Yep, it's under pressure, heat expands things, eventually it gets hot enough. At the least, it'll begin to overcharge, and then in extreme, it could potentially blow the top of it off. So you don't want to store it near any real significant source of heat.
Like underneath the seat where it's exposed to water and might possibly rust.
I mean, if you've got yeah, that could be potentially a bad scenario if it is getting wet down there, where it's the bottom of it's starting to rust out or the top if it's dripping on there. But most people do store them under the sink in the kitchen, so I mean, as long as you don't have a leak, it shouldn't be an issue. As long as there's not any excessive moisture down there for whatever reason, it should be a fine place to store it. So here's some SDS information for the ABC, the halotron, the CO2. I'm not gonna read off these ingredients, mostly for fear of embarrassment, but you can go ahead and take a look at them. If you happen to accidentally get sprayed for whatever reason though, the exposure control is pretty much the same for each of the 3 of these. Getting your eyes flushed with water, skin, wash with soap and water. Inhalation, first step with any chemical inhalation, so it'll be move with fresh air. Ingestion, they all say do not do vomiting, seek medical attention. I'll add, there should be an SDS sheet in your SDS booklet at your facility for each different type of extinguisher. So if you've got ABC, there should be a sheet in there for that. And if you've also got halotron, then there needs to be another sheet for that. And if you ever wanted to know any further details on first aid measures, if someone does get sprayed with one, you could refer to that and it'll tell you everything you need to know, and all the chemical information and all that. So the last time we talked about inhalation injuries. So heat inhalation, lung burn, just breathing in really hot air, burns the lungs internally. All the damage from these things is going to be internal. So it's gonna be really hard to tell just by looking at someone, how badly they're hurt or injured. But it's just breathing hot air, and then smoke inhalation makes up 60 to 80% of fire fatalities, which is a huge portion. Even on that low end, that's the majority. And on that high end, that's a lot, 80%. Frequently hidden, like I said, damage can be internal, so it's gonna be really hard to tell how severe the damage is just by looking at somebody. May have a black around the nose or mouth, but other than that, it's gonna be hard to tell. You need to go and seek medical attention. But what happens? Breathing in that smoke affects the body's ability to absorb oxygen, can cause permanent damage to organs, including the brain. There's over 100 known toxic substances present in a fire, just from the basic chemical reaction of a fire. But then on top of that, if you think we'll use this building, if this building were to catch on fire, you got to think about all the chemicals getting released from the paints, plastics, any treated lumbers, the ceiling tiles, all that. There's cleaning products. So all the chemicals from those materials are also getting released into that smoke, and that's what you're breathing in. So it can be very dangerous very quickly. So with that being said, if you did find yourself in a scenario where the building's on fire, there's smoke everywhere, what do you need to do when exiting? Yep, get low. Smoke heat is going to rise. So you want to stay low and try and breathe in as little of that smoke as possible because this is very dangerous. Also add too, to never go back into a burning building. If you get out, don't go back in for anything. All right, so fire prevention, cooking, and supplies at home too. A lot of this stuff's going to apply at home. Wind up after spills, so be aware of your clothing. You'll wind up like this granny here with your sleeve on fire. If it's a stove fire, keep the door closed, turn off the heat. If it's a grease fire, kitchen grease fire that's small that you can get to it, put a lid on it, suffocate it that way. If it's gotten out of hand, you're at home, you don't have one of those Class K extinguishers. They used to recommend using flour. Flour on there, it soaks that grease up and kind of dampens that fire that way. They don't recommend that you use flour anymore. Flour itself is not all that flammable. It's not like you go light a bag of flour on fire. However, in those scenarios, you're going to be throwing it, and flour is such a fine material that a lot of times the dust from that flour itself will combust. So a lot of times you can do added damage you can add to that fire by trying to throw flour on it. So they don't recommend it anymore. I'm not saying it would 100% happen every time, but it can happen, so that's why I don't recommend it anymore. As far as I know, though, baking soda, salt, sugar, still okay. It just does the same thing. It just kind of soaks that grease up. But if you're anywhere that's got a Class K extinguisher, that's always going to be your best bet to get that fire out. Electrical, so don't leave space heaters on. If you're gonna have them this at work or home either, don't leave them on unattended. So if you leave your office or your home, don't leave space heater on unattended. Best to get the common with the tip over safety feature. So if it accidentally gets knocked over, it'll shut itself off automatically. That's especially good at home. If you have pets or small children and you've got carpet, they knock those over, you don't know, and then it lands on the carpet, start a fire rather quickly that way. So if you are going to have them, it's good to get the kind of tip over safety feature. Repair or replace any loose or frayed cords. So any kind of electrical cord, whether that be extension cord, power strips, a cord to your computer, any piece of equipment, it's an electrical cord that's loose or frayed. Don't use that piece of equipment until it's been repaired or replaced. Frequent circuit breaker trips, that's going to be an issue too if you're plugging some appliance in and keeps tripping the breaker. There's some sort of issue there. Usually every time you're tripping that breaker, you're creating a small spark, so fire hazard. So be mindful of that. So daisy chaining, plugging the power strips into power strips, extension cords into power strips, extension cords into extension cords. Adding these little 3-prong or 3-outlet adapters onto an extension cord or power strip. All that's a really easy way to overload an outlet and create a fire hazard. So please don't be doing that. And then smoke detectors. 60% of home fire deaths result in properties without properly working smoke alarms. That right there is an extremely telling statistic on how important it is to have smoke detectors in your home. So if you don't have it, it's something I would highly recommend because it's something that's really inexpensive compared to the cost of losing a home or losing a loved one. Batteries in those things need to be replaced 1 to 2 times a year. NFPA always recommends twice a year. They generally send out their alert on time change. Doesn't matter when you're doing it, as long as you're doing it. A lot of people do it on 4th of July, Christmas, usually break even. But then something a lot of people don't know, if you're gonna take that smoke detector off the ceiling, on the back of it, it'll have the month and the year it's manufactured. Whole thing needs to be replaced every 10 years from that manufacturer's date. So that's something to think about if you've been in your home a while, or maybe you just bought a home, that may be something you want to check. They do make it now with lithium batteries, so you don't have to worry about replacing the batteries, but they're only good for 10 years. And obviously they're more expensive upfront, but it probably takes exactly about the same if you replace the batteries like you're supposed to. And then the last thing is basically just saying, don't have an accumulation of materials that's gonna create a fire hazard, just be mindful of that. There's a picture there, the dryer with the lint. That is something to be thinking of at home for sure. Make sure you clean out that lint catcher of your dryer. I've actually done 2 people that start a fire, their dryer catch on fire from not ever clean it. It's just crazy, but this is a really good way to start a fire. Anybody have any questions?
What about carbon monoxide detectors? Would you recommend the same thing every 10 years?
I don't know specifically on carbon monoxide detectors, but I'm going to assume yes. And I would be pretty confident that whenever you bought it in the paperwork, it would tell you in there how long it's good for.
I've got a common fire. I had one last 10 years on that.
Yeah. And that's a good way to go, is getting the combo. Yeah, my boss was just telling me about some people dying in Mexico from carbon monoxide poisoning. Yeah, it can be very dangerous. Anybody else got any other questions?
So, Seth, when you guys talk to people, what's the number one thing they do that causes a fire? Here at work.
Well, at work, luckily, there hasn't been too many fires since I've been here. The only ones I can remember is that kitchen grease fire, like I said, which luckily, whenever she did that, it worked everything, so it follows tiles, but luckily nothing actually caught fire, so it was just a flat extremely quick. There was another fire in the bathroom at FRB up on the ceiling. It was the electrical fan in the bathroom. It actually caught fire. And I've said a big majority of fires in general are usually going to be electrical of some sort. But here in the workplace, there was one other one in Salisal, and it was a very similar deal to that too. It was also bathroom bin up there. So, well, that's what they said. That one was sketchy. It's an apartment building, but that was allegedly. Majority of fires usually going to be electrical. So, make sure. Anybody else got any questions?
What do you think fire extinguishers like? Fire department get recharged?
To get it recharged, you're usually gonna have to contact the company that does that, specializes in it. If you're talking about like for home, say, you may know more, but usually it's gonna be cheaper to just buy a new one than to just have them recharge one.
And a lot of those things, buy it, load, whatever, can't be, they're just.
Yeah, they're just.
For a certain time, they'll be thrown away.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of those that you buy for home, I mean, they don't even have a dial on them. But, yeah.
So are they recycled in any way?
I don't know what they do with it. I assume they recycle them. I would assume that whenever you take them. I don't know. Do you happen to know?
I don't know.
I don't know what they do with them. I mean, it's hard to
The only thing I've ran into where we were left with was like, I'm sure you went through all the kitty ones, if you had their kitty.
Yeah, they sent out that.
A lot of the companies, there was a few that had issues, and a lot of the companies just decided, we're not servicing any of those because we don't want to be liable.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of the same brand that they were probably still
There's a
good.
big recall on those, I believe.
Yeah, there was. So we had a lot of them in recognition vehicles. Yeah, that's a big deal. But yeah, I don't know for a fact that I would have to, they're used. Anybody else? We'll go ahead and review them real quick. What were the three elements we said had to be present for a fire to occur? Yeah, we read. What was the type of fire? No, ordinary combustibles, set A, rad. How about B? Yep, flammable liquids. How about C? Energized electrical equipment. D?
Metal combustibles.
Yeah, K. All right, what was that pass method? How would we do it all together? Nailed it. So real quickly, I also too, I could have added these extinguishers, whenever they're mounted in the workplace, they should be facing this direction. So they should be facing outward, they shouldn't be turned, they should be mounted where they're like this, where the pin's in the back, and you gotta take it off the wall. So it should be mounted like this with all that information, the class, the pin, the dial, everything should be facing outward where you don't have to run and turn around. It's just gonna save you time. So that's something to be mindful of too, because every now some of those people, for whatever reason, put it in there backwards. Anyways though, like I said, this extinguisher does mimic a 20-pound, so it is fairly heavy. If you've got a back injury or anything like that, this extinguisher on the ground here in a minute, you can do so. You don't need to pick it up. But it's going to shoot a green laser out of the end of this. I don't think everybody can see it, but this over here, the 4 silver dots at the bottom, that's going to represent our base of the fire. So that's where you need to aim this laser. Don't point it at the screen, aim at the 4 silver dots, because that's our base of the fire. Whenever you're done, there's a little button here. It's underneath this hose. It doesn't beep or click or do anything to let you know that it was engaged. But just make sure you push that one time, because it resets it for the next person. Because like I said, it's going to last about 32, 33 seconds. So we're not pushing it. Somebody's going to run out of juice. The pin, after the first person pulls the pin, everyone else just goes through the motion, because it's jerry-rigged and it's hard to get back in there, and it gives people some problems. And then, lastly, whenever you get done, please set it back on the ground. Don't try and hand it off to the next person. People always want to do that. It's awkward. You almost afraid someone's going to drop it on their toe. So when you're done with it, please just set it down. Whenever you come up here, if you don't mind, please sign both of these sign-in sheets, one for each class. Nobody's got any questions? Anyone? Okay, I'll bring this around. And then whoever wants to come up here first. I don't think so. I'm just going to turn right here and make whatever minutes.
They're on level 4.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. For that fireman, fire marshal.
Right.
I know that's the whole try to get it. Same.
You got it. Oh. So we just got over there. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Everybody gets to try it. That's good. No, I mean. I think we're gonna. Like the insurance. Just push that button or they get out. But you got me. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we did that. They cried. Do what? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got it. Here, the next one. Yeah. Not super.
Yeah.
They said you certainly need that. We have a new one.
Here, yeah, I was gonna say, here's the dollar.
It's right. Everybody down the, that's why easier to have to start a fire outside. That's what we had, we did, so we go, we could put it. Always do it.
So we're gonna take a short break.
Yeah, when we're done with the fire, here we go.
Okay, we're done with the fire. Let's see if it's got any questions.
Okay, let's take about 15 minutes or so to break before we start the next session. Yeah.
Same thing. Anybody's got any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask. This training is gonna be over safe driving. We're gonna go over the purpose, cover some statistics on how deadly motor vehicle accidents are, cover some responsibilities of drivers, talk about before you take off, everything you need to be looking for in your vehicle, kind of like a checklist, defensive driving, talk about driving in inclement weather, different scenarios, and then finish with some distracted driving information. Before we take off, then, I guess we'll start with this. Raise your hand if you feel like you're a safe driver. We'll see when we get in here later. So the purpose of this training is to educate on the dangers of driving with a focus on defensive driving and distracted driving. To do this, we'll cover some statistics to highlight the amount of risk involved in driving and driving while distracted. Then we'll discuss measures and methods we can take to help minimize or eliminate our risk of being involved in a driving or distracted driving accident. It says eliminate, and really it's gonna be hard to completely eliminate your possibility of being in an incident just because you can't control what everyone else is out there on the roads doing. We can for sure do a lot of things to help minimize it, even with regards to someone else, but I think they can't completely eliminate your risk of getting into an accident while driving. But how deadly are motor vehicle accidents? Here's some statistics to highlight. Motor vehicle crashes are a leading cause of injury or related death in the United States for people ages 1 to 54, 21% in 2020. Big portion right there. Also, #1 cause of work-related death. Approximately 3.8 million people have died in the U.S. in automobile crashes since its invention. To compare that, approximately 1.3 million U.S. soldiers have died in combat since 1775. That was a lot of motor vehicle deaths. And then 4.8 million medically consulted injuries resulted from vehicle crashes in 2020. Does anybody have an idea? It says they're also the #1 cause of work-related death. Anybody know what #2 is? Oh, yeah, I feel like you want to say it.
I don't want to say. I want to say slips, trips, and falls.
Yeah, it's pretty sure, yeah, it's fall. And it should, I don't know if it's in here somewhere on later, but it's a leading cause of injury-related death in the U.S. period. It says leading. Does anybody know what second is on that for injury-related deaths? This is just overall, not the workplace. I'm trying to think, I know it was tied with one thing, like,
Yeah.
it wasn't electrocution. I know one was, believe it or not, accidental poisonings. And that was tied with another one. I can't remember what that third one was, but I was kind of surprised with the accidental poisoning being that high. It actually, now that I think about it, I think it actually was also a fall. Just It's been outside of work. It was fault and accidental poisoning. Here's some statistics for 2020 motor vehicle crash highlights. So 42,338 deaths. Medically consulted injuries, we just said a second ago, but 4.8 million. Cost on that for all these wrecks, $473.2 billion. That is an extreme amount of money. And then I don't know why it's listed like this, but motor vehicle mileage, 2,904 billion. I think it would have been easier to say 2.9 trillion, unless I'm doing my math wrong there. That's a weird way to say that, but that is a lot of miles. So that's how many miles people are logging on the highways in the US a year, or in 2020, which is, that is a lot of miles. But registered vehicles in the United States, 276 million. Licensed drivers in the US, 228 million. And then death rate per 100 million vehicle miles. So for every 100 million miles driven, there's 1.46 deaths. And then death rate per 10,000 registered vehicles. So for every 10,000 registered vehicles, there's 1.53 deaths. And then death rate per 100,000 people is 12.85. So kind of give you some highlights here on statistics on how common and more, probably more highlights how costly they are. And it's a lot of money involved with vehicle crashes. So responsibility of the drivers. So if you're going to be operating a motor vehicle, state of Oklahoma at least, you have to be registered, you have to license and registration for your vehicle on you. Vehicle maintenance, obviously that's going to be your responsibility, so you can't rely on someone else to take care of your vehicle for you, especially your personal vehicle. So you have to have an appropriate driver's license. So obviously have to have a driver's license to operate a vehicle on the highway. You also have to have automobile insurance. And then refrain from driving if you have any type of disability or impairment that would affect driving. That could be either permanent or temporary. So even if you got some sort of injury, maybe it could be some medication you're on, you're not supposed to be operating a vehicle or heavy equipment on medication. There could be things like that. Or maybe you have suffered an injury that's led to a disability and you just no longer can drive anymore. But if you have that kind of issue, stay off the road, wear appropriate eyewear. So this is more so speaking of if you need to wear glasses or contacts, things like that, make sure you have on appropriate eyewear depending on your vision. I mean, you may wear glasses for reading and not need them for driving, but if you need them for driving, make sure you're wearing them. I'll also add to, it's not really talking about this, but sunglasses are a big help, especially this time of year. It's sunny out, bright, and really be hard to see if the sun shining at your face and you have to squint. So having a good pair of sunglasses in the vehicle is always really good this time of year. And then understand and follow the laws of the road. So ignorance of the law is not going to hold up in court. So that's your responsibility to know the law and follow them at all times, regardless of which state you're in. If you're going to another state. And then operate the vehicle safely. That's ultimately, if you're behind the wheel, that's your responsibility. All right, so what's the things we should be looking at on the vehicle before we take off?
Tire pressure, signals, make sure your signals work.
Yep, signals. What else?
Tire pressure,
Tire pressure. Yep, that's a good one.
just your mirrors.
Yep, your mirrors, that's especially important if we're talking about company vehicles and we've got different people driving. That's one of the first things you need to check, because I know there's a big difference between me and Bodie. Whenever I get in the vehicle, I've got to adjust the mirrors in the seats, or I can't see anything.
Important thing is put your seatbelt on.
Yep, before we take off, need to make sure that seatbelt's latched. What up?
Look inside.
Yes, it's a good one. To elaborate on that, so put your phone on silent, but yeah, you take another route, radio, if you're gonna set it before you take off, not after. GPS, if we're gonna be using our phone for GPS, set that before you take off. What else? It's all been good.
Look your surroundings.
Yep, your surroundings, absolutely.
Weather.
Look around. Yep, that's another big one. Know the forecast before you take off. It's going to be really inclement weather. If this is some kind of trip that is not of extreme urgency, it may be best to wait till that storm blows over before you take off. Because Driving in inclement weather is gonna drastically increase your risk of being in automobile accidents. That's a very, very important one. Anybody think of any other ones? Y'all looked at quite a few. We'll go ahead and go through. I think y'all got most of them. Vehicle inspect outside of the vehicle, like we said, tire tread pressure. I don't think I actually mentioned the tread, but good to look at, be mindful of. Start getting your tires worn out, good chance it'll blow out on you, cause an accident. We said turn signals, also brake lights with that, headlights too, if it's gonna be late at night, so check all those lights and turn signals, make sure those are working. Be aware of driving conditions regards to weather, mentioned that one, and construction. That's another big one, especially here in town. I know with that, what's that thing called, roundabout, they've been putting in. So be mindful of that. If you're gonna have to leave earlier to make it wherever you're going in time, that way you're not trying to rush around. So be mindful of construction. That's gonna slow you down. Luckily now, everybody with their phones, a lot of times if you are using your GPS on your phone, it'll let you know if there is construction going on that highway, which is really handy. Like we said GPS or radio before we got off. Buckle your seatbelt. Here's another statistic. So more than half of teens and adults who die in crashes are reported as unrestrained at the time of the crash, according to CDC. So, a very telling statistic on how important it is to buckle up. And I know we've got employees here from different tribes and things like that, but I know this is a big one here at Cherokee Nation company policy to always make sure you're wearing your seatbelt, whether you're automobile or even like side by side, heck, floor, even if it's got a seatbelt, any kind of equipment or automobile, anything, tracks or whatever, if you got a seatbelt there available, please wear that. It's gonna help keep you safe. I mean, it's there for a reason, and the reason is to protect you. And then little caveat added, safety kit, is not necessarily required to have work, it may be. But this is always a good thing to have, just a small, it doesn't have to be a lot. Things like, well, I ask y'all, what would be some things you'd want to put in a safety kit to be inside your vehicle?
First aid kits.
Yeah, small first aid kit, jumper cables, what else? Flashlight, big,
Yeah, some of the reflective things you can set out behind your car.
yes, those very handy too.
Blanket.
Yep, blankets could be, snacks. Yeah, that could be really handy, mini air compressor, a lot of them too, just can't fix a flat, something like that. Those are good things. Would be, depending on if it's like the little battery powered ones, because your vehicle may be down, but yes, that could be something that's good. Said jumper cable. It could be just like a small crescent wrench, something like that. It could be something simple as you need to hook your battery cable and hook it back up, things like that. So small crescent, pair of pliers, good. Flashlight is definitely a big one. Oh, that's one I was gonna add. Really good too. Just get one of those. It doesn't have to be expensive one. Cheap orange or the yellow safety vest. So if you're out there and it helps big. We talked about she's talking about the little reflective triangles, but it's good to have a bright safety vest too, because if you're on the shoulder, you want people to be able to see you, because that is a big hazard being pulled over on the side of the road, especially if you're on a highway, turnpike, interstate, something like that. And can be very dangerous. It's best if you can, if you're on a highway like that, if you're gonna have to pull over off to the road, try and pull over as soon as you can on the on-ramp. So everyone kind of understand what I'm talking about, get the on-ramp, and it's usually got that third lane that's running quite a ways. Get over on the shoulder of that. That's gonna put you away from the 2-lane highway. You're still gonna have people that are coming on, but it's gonna be a little less people driving by, a little safer, a little less traffic. But still there. So defensive driving is driving to save lives, time, and money in spite of conditions around you and the actions of others. I kind of said that at the very beginning, like you're not going to be able to predict other people's actions. So even if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, you can still find yourself in an accident just as a result of someone else's actions. And there's things you can do to help prevent that, but at the end of the day, other drivers are a hazard. In fact, 2 weeks ago, on my way to work, I was driving down Stick Ross, and for those of you that are familiar, won't know exactly what I'm talking about, but right before you get to the end of it, the light at Sequoia, you come down that hill in the low spot, up that last hill. But I was coming down the hill, and then when I hit the valley, someone was coming down that hill, the opposite direction, and they were all the way up. I mean, the center of their vehicle was going right down the middle of the lane. I literally had to run my 2 tires on the passenger side off the road to not hit it. And that's I mean, not my fault, nothing I can do. So there's gonna be scenarios, there's nothing you can do. I mean, I honked the horn at them, they jerked it back over, but they still, luckily there was enough dirt there where it wasn't like a big ditch where I flew off the road. But a limb slapped my mirror, that was about it. But, could have been if there was a big ditch there, it would have to run off in it, to do that or hit them head on. You don't want to do that. So, I mean, the actions of others is a big thing to pay attention to. And I'm gonna add right there, I don't know because it happened so fast, I couldn't really get a good look, but I'm assuming they were probably on their phone. They were distracted for some reason because they weren't paying attention to the road. So whoever was reading, they were distracted, but if I'd been in a scenario where I was distracted as well, and I wasn't looking, man, we would have hit head on. So very important to pay attention to what you're doing, and others. So defensive driving is the responsibility of everyone who operates a vehicle on a roadway community. So collision prevention, you need to recognize the hazard, scan ahead and around your vehicle. Check mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds. I know that sounds like a lot, but I mean, it's just a quick glance. I mean, it doesn't take very long to just check your mirrors. So always be checking those, being aware of your surroundings. And be aware too, if you're in a blind spot. A lot of the newer vehicles now have the little light in the mirror that will alert you, or some of them even have cameras that'll show you that blind spot, which is extremely handy. But if you don't, make sure whenever you're changing lanes to look, make sure there's nobody there in that blind spot. Always stay alert. Use the what if strategy to keep you alert. That's going to be just working through scenarios in your head. Come up to, let's just say you come up to an intersection, a 4-way intersection, and you've got a red light. Well, then it turns green. Just be thinking of like, what if somebody does run this light once? So make sure you look both ways before you take off. It could be something as simple as that. But always just be thinking, what if? Just run different scenarios through your head while you're driving down the road. If this happened, if X happened, I'm going to do Y. Things kind of like that. And it'll kind of keep you prepared on how to react in certain scenarios. To understand the defense, know what to do to prevent a traffic hazard from becoming a collision. Know the consequences of your driving choices. Know the basic defenses of scanning in all directions, slow down, and there's going to be some highlights that are going to just keep coming back up over and over in this training. Scanning, looking, paying attention, it's going to be a big one, and slowing down is going to be a big one. And then use a safe following distance. We'll touch more on that right here. So the 3-second rule, this is what you should do. When following a vehicle, pick an overhead road sign, tree, other roadside marker. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be a rock, whatever. Anything will stand out. Note when the vehicle in front of you passes that marker, then see how many seconds it takes. So that shouldn't be a 1, 2, 3. It was 1001, 1002, 1003 for you to pass the same spot. If it's not at least 3 seconds, so if you pass that same spot before you get that 3 seconds, you need to increase that follow distance. Thinking following distance in terms of time and not space. That's why we're using the 3-second rule. With a standard of 2.5 seconds, highway engineers use time rather than distance to represent how long it takes a driver to perceive and react to hazards. National Safety Council also uses the standard plus a little extra. That's why I bumped it up from 2.5 to the 3, when recommending a 3-second rule for following distance. So that's something a lot of people aren't aware of, and it's something that's really easy to practice. When you go down the highway, just pick up any roads to the speed limit sign, person in front of you passes, 1001, 1002, 1003. As long as it's 3 seconds or longer, you're at a safe follow distance. Anything less, then it's going to be hard for you to react quickly enough if they slam on their brakes. The 4 fatal driving behaviors are going to be speeding. That's why, like I said, we're going to emphasize slowing down. Speeding greatly increase your risk or increase the severity of that injury if you are in a motor vehicle accident. And right away, so failure to yield, things like that. This would be another big one. Intersections are very dangerous. So I kind of gave a scenario earlier, but always make sure at intersections you're looking both ways before you take off. I mean, I know there's lights there. If you've got the green light, everyone else should be stopped, but everybody doesn't always do what they're supposed to. So you need to be paying attention. And two, there's things like emergency vehicles. It could be a cop car, ambulance, good Lord, couldn't think ambulance. The cop car, ambulance, fire truck, things like that. If you've got the radio up real loud, you can't hear those sirens. A lot of times I feel like they aren't even really that loud. You don't hear them until they're kind of up on you. But that's something to be paying attention for, because I mean, they'll just blow right through those things sometimes. And we have police officers at Cherokee Nation Marshals, and they get in quite a few wrecks just from that. And it happens, it's dangerous flying through those intersections like that. And they slow down for them, but it's still just very dangerous. Intersections are in the right of way. So then driving left of center, kind of like I said, I almost got hit the other day. Somebody coming over my lane, and so hopefully everyone knows that solid lines are no passing zone, and your dash is you pass. But, and then the last one, tailgating, following too closely. So another one, which is going to emphasize slowing down and cover that 3-second rule on how to judge that good, safe following distance. And two, though, a lot of the newer vehicles also have that built in. Whenever you set the cruise, they've got a follow distance where you can set it, which can be handy. Hopefully this video plays. So this is gonna highlight, running into just a concrete post with this vehicle, but they're doing it at different speeds. So really good video on highlighting how much damage or how severe the crash is gonna be at varying speeds. That's 30 miles an hour, 50. 80.
We don't deserve new cars.
120. Hopefully no one's driving that fast. I mean, 160, that's just absurd. Yeah. Yeah, I can't believe it didn't split it just clean. I can't believe it wrapped around that thing. That kind of gives you an idea. I mean, that was obviously most of those were on the extreme end, 30, 50 to up to 80s where most of them are going to be at. But even those, I mean, you can see, I mean, you're going that fast, you're stopping on a dime. That momentum, that pressure's got to go somewhere. So that's another very important reason to wear your seatbelt. I mean, you think you're not flying out that window at 80 miles an hour when you hit that with no seatbelt? You're going right out of there. So you're going to get hurt with seatbelt on anyways at 80 miles an hour. You definitely you don't want everything in your favor. Act correctly, act in time, choose the safest driving maneuver to prevent collision. It says, remember, others may act in time, but they may act incorrectly. So this, once again, basically just saying to be mindful of other drivers, always be paying attention, scanning, looking, and anticipating is a good word. Anticipating what others are doing or about to do. All right. What are your driving behaviors? Do you drive the posted speed limit regardless of what the traffic is doing and how fast it's going? Give a raise of hands if that's you. Nobody. Put a little caveat on this one because I don't, and I may get in trouble for saying this, but ask if you drive the posted speed limit regardless of what the traffic is doing and how fast it's going. I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to be your best bet. If it's 50 miles an hour and everyone else is going 70, I feel like that is slightly more dangerous. Especially if we're on a 2 to 4 lane highway. If you're trying to change lanes, boy, that distance somebody's running, let's say you're going 50 miles an hour, person behind you is going 70 miles an hour, you cut in front of them, they're gonna have to brake if you cut in front of them. Let's just say it was even 50 yards. They're gonna have to brake or change lanes. If you got 50 yards in between you, you're both going 7 miles an hour, they got 50 yards in between you. You know what I mean? You're going the same speed, so you're slowing that, or I guess you're increasing that reaction time, or decreasing that reaction time by driving slower. And then two, another thing, just a numbers game. If you're going 50 miles an hour, everybody else is going 7 miles an hour, you've got that many more vehicles that are driving by you. So just statistically speaking, you're coming in proximity to a lot more vehicles than if you were driving the same speed as everybody else, or relatively close to the same speed as everybody else. So you think just from the likelihood of that standpoint, more vehicles you're around, more likely you're going to be in an accident. So I don't necessarily agree with that to always maintain the speed limit. If everybody else is driving faster, it's probably going to be a safer bet to kind of go with the flow of traffic. Do you plan ahead for weather conditions and construction hazards when planning your daily routes? Raise your hands on that. Okay, we've got a few on that one. I'll be honest, I'm really bad about this one too, unless it's really inclement weather. But for the most part, I mean, if it's, we'll touch on it, you know, if it's light rain, things like that, it's not going to be too bad. But if it is really inclement weather, it's really important to pay attention to that, especially to storm, tornado season, things like that. You don't want to be on the road in those events. Do you alert other drivers to your actions using turn signals? The rest of you are jerks.
Yeah.
I hate when people don't use their signal. Man, it's so important though to let other people know what you're doing. That's what the signals are for. So other people are aware of your actions, especially on the highway whenever you're changing lanes, so going the same direction. And please use those turn signals. Do you wear a safety belt and require all passengers to do the same in your vehicle? That's the majority, that's good. That's another, I mean, we've kind of highlighted some statistics on how important or really how dangerous it can be to not wear that seat belt. And two, this adds on there to make everyone else in that vehicle wear the seat belt. I mean, at work, we police the drivers, so I'm so used to it. I don't ever not wear my seat belt. Plus, my vehicle won't stop. I can't stand it. It won't stop even if I don't. I mean, you have to do it. Actually, it won't even let you throw it in gear if you don't want to see. It's yeah.
Radio.
Yeah. So those are good safety features that are putting on their vehicles, but yes, please wear your seatbelt. Because like I said earlier, it's there for a reason, and that reason is to protect you and keep you safe. Do you practice safe driving behavior by not talking on the cell phone or texting? Beautiful. You say you never get on? Nah.
Really? It's like how much I get on my mom before, and I was like, if she ever called me, talking to her, I never lived that day.
Most people don't never do it. Every now and then you get one person like you, but for the most part, the people just limit it. It is, I mean, it is hard, it's difficult. Even to the newer vehicles, they'll connect, but still distracted driving, even if you're using the wireless setup, you're still talking, you don't have the phone to your ear, but you're talking in the microphone. Even that's still distracted driving, or if it's got the talk to text, you can just talk and it'll send the text for you. It's still distracted driving. We'll get into that more here in a second. Things to watch for. Oh, okay, so things to watch for. What are some things you should be paying extra close attention to while driving down the road? As we got work zones up here, that's gonna be a scenario where you need to be extra cautious, slowing down. You always have to slow down in the work zone. You'll see those signs behind double in the work zone. What are some other things?
School bus,
Mm-hmm.
pedestrians.
Yep, pedestrians, crossways, yes. Animals are a big one. Yeah, around here, deer especially, yes. What else?
Solid vehicles.
Yep, and vehicles on the side of the road, should be getting, if you're on the highway, you should be getting over for those vehicles. Emergency vehicles too, that's now the law, you're supposed to get over in the other lane if possible, to avoid driving right next to them. Those are all good, what else?
Children.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be all just specifically hazards, like we're all kind of going in the same direction with all the answers, which is good. But it just broadly, all the things, so. Yeah, potholes, very, yeah.
Storm debris.
Yep, storm debris, storms in general. We talk about the weather, things to be mindful of and paying attention to. There's gonna be basically things, things that can either cause an accident, injury, or increase those odds. So,
Dump trucks.
yeah, dump trucks, anything, school bus, whatever, you're gonna have to increase.
I've never been behind a dump truck and not got my windshield cracked.
They are pretty bad about that. Light weather, so even low light conditions, that's gonna increase those odds of getting into an automobile accident. So if you can, I know, certain times of year, you gotta get up, you gotta go to work, it's dark outside, for the most part. For most people now, it's probably gonna be daylight, but in the winter time, especially it's gonna be dark in those mornings, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you can, avoid driving in low light conditions. Traffic, anytime there's a lot of traffic, high hazard area. Like talked about just statistically speaking, the more cars you're around, the more likely you're gonna be to get into an accident. If you're the only person on the road, although you'd be pretty safe, I mean, it's kind of gonna be on you, excluding animals, that's an issue around here, but if you're the only person on the road, kind of gonna be on you. If there's a ton of traffic, then that's all the other people we gotta worry about, human error, so. Traffic, blind spots of semis, it's another big one. We talked on blind spots for your own personal vehicle. Semis, they have big blind spots. So if you're on the highway, you're not gonna want to stay side by side a semi on the highway for a long stretch. You can, either slow down or speed up and go around. You don't need to be going right down beside them. They have blowouts all the time too. So if you're around or get in a scenario where you're boxed in by 3 semis, bad deal. So semis either slow down or speed up to go around them. They do have big blind spots. Talked about emergency vehicles earlier. We touched on the move over law, so people on the side of the road, make sure you're getting over if you can. School buses, we mentioned that. Trainings, that's another big one, especially in rural areas around here where they don't have the little gates. Railroad crossing, we'll make sure you're stopping, looking both ways. My parents live over a railroad track, and certain times of year it gets grown up around there, and it's kind of hard to see that one direction. I'll always stop, wait a second, I'll roll down the windows, turn off the radio and roll down the windows, make sure I can't hear one coming. Just can't see real good there. That's something could be helpful. Slow moving vehicles, so that's another hazard. Pedestrians we touched on. Motorcycles, we didn't touch on that, but motorcycles, big hazard too. People a lot of times will overlook motorcycles, so always be mindful of them. And man, if somebody's being reckless on a motorcycle, they can sneak up on you fast on the highways. That's why, like you said, you be scanning those mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds, looking around, being aware of your surroundings, because some people do get scared on those motorcycles. So something to be mindful of. They'll pass it, 2 cars, they'll pass it between on interstate and stuff like that. So, bicyclists, another one, people on bicycles, I mean, legally, they got a right to be out there. I think they should be, not on the roads. I mean, they need to be on the sidewalk, but people will do it. So if you see someone on a bicycle, you know, pay attention, don't run into them. But they do have a right to be out there. Animals, we touched on, deer, big one, but dogs too. I mean, dogs, cats, things like that, awesome. Turtles, yeah, turtles. Has anyone ever actually known of someone getting a flat tire for running over a turtle? I've heard that, but I didn't know it was like, this is one of the things that I made up to stop people from running over turtles. I've never heard anybody get it, but I've always heard that a lot. Okay, so now we're kind of getting into driving in the inclement weather, and so driving in the rain. Once again, beat this to death, but drive slowly. So anytime there's inclement weather, first thing is always going to be slow down, increase that follow distance. We've got wet road conditions or icy road conditions. We're going to need to increase that follow distance because it's not going to be as easily to stop. The road's wet or slick. Like it says, it's harder to control or stop your vehicle on a slick road. Increase follow distance so you have plenty of time to stop for vehicles ahead of you. Also remember that every vehicle handles differently. This is particularly true when driving wet roads. This is very important, especially at work. If you've got numerous different vehicles or different types of vehicles, at least one may do much better in the rain than the other. I know my mom used to have a Chevy Malibu. Man, that thing was terrible in the rain and snow. I mean, it was just awful. It was very dangerous to drive that thing on any kind of wet road. So if you've got a particular vehicle in the fleet that doesn't do well on wet roads, take the other one. You know, just be mindful of that. Or don't get out there at all. You don't have to. Use headlights. So generally speaking, if it's raining, it's not always, but if it's raining hard, usually it's going to be dark outside and cloudy. Turn those headlights on. Even if you can see good, it still helps other people see you, especially too if it's raining real hard. It'll help people see you through that rain. So turn your headlights on if it's raining. Turn on your wipers. It says windshield wiper fluid with Rain X preferred. And if you're not using that stuff, you need to get on board because that's involved. And it helps so much. It's just in the windshield wiper fluid. All you gotta do is just push the little button, use windshield wiper fluid. Man, that rain just beads off. If you're going down the highway, you don't even need to turn the wipers off. It all beads up. It just rolls off. I mean, unless it's like a super fine mist, that's about the only time it'll get to where you can't see. So as long as you're driving at any speed, I mean, you still need to turn the wipers on, but, and yeah, that stuff's awesome. It makes a huge difference because vehicles that doesn't have it for that rain, it really makes it, especially if you've got people coming at you there from their lights, the glare from that rain off your windshield, it makes it hard to see. So if you're not using that, I highly recommend it. So I don't even think it costs hardly any more than the regular windshield wiper fluids. But man, it makes a difference. And don't be afraid to pull over if necessary. So if it's raining super hard, you can't see, you know, highway, pull over. You don't want to put yourself at risk, you know, driving just because you're in a hurry, you gotta be somewhere. It's not worth it. I mean, pull over, stop. Usually whenever it's really hard rain like that, it's not gonna last that long. Pull over 5, maybe 10 minutes. It's gonna pass. It may still be raining, but usually the downpour will not last that long. And if you are pulled over, make sure you turn on your hazard lights and get over as far as you possibly can. And avoid driving in wet, dark conditions when possible. Like I said, safest bet is always gonna be if you don't gotta be out there, don't go out there. I mean, you can't get in a car wreck sitting on the couch. So that's always gonna be the safest bet. This picture is actually from around here somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where, but it's pretty local. But you always hear this or see the signs, turn around, don't drown. People often underestimate the power of rushing water. It only takes 12 inches of rushing water to carry away most cars, and just 2 feet of rushing water can carry away most trucks and SUVs. CDC reports the most common type of flood-related drowning occurs when a vehicle is driven into a hazardous floodwater. When you see the road flooded, or if there are barriers blocking the road, turn around. To put this on here, for example, is just like back here, you can see the water all over the road. It very well could have been like that here at one point, and there's no road underneath there. And you may not know, so that's why you don't need to drive through it. It can either sweep you away, like I said, there's not going to be a road underneath there, and then you're definitely going to get swept away if you drive up. Really good friend of mine, his father, six months ago now. Maybe it was last year, actually. Two of his good friends died trying to drive over a low water bridge. Swept the truck away, off in the creek, they're upside down, couldn't get out of it. All the time, especially on those low water bridges, man, they can be dangerous if you're out there in rural areas. So definitely don't chance it. Like you said, don't drown. So if you see any water covering the road like that, it's best to find an alternate route or whatever you're gonna do for that day. Just move it to the next, move it around. It's just absolutely something urgent. Driving in snow or ice, same thing. Drive, slow down, increase that follow distance. It's definitely hard to stop whenever there's snow and ice on the road. You're gonna slide if you slam on those brakes. So slow down, increase follow distance. Bridges and overpasses freeze first, so take it slow on those and avoid sudden changes in speed or direction. Watch out for black eyes. Keep all windows clear. Visibility is crucial, especially in bad weather. So once again, turn on your headlights. Wipers, crank up the defroster if necessary. Man, if you get an ice scraper out there, good to carry a can of de-icer too in your vehicle in the winter. Spray that on there. It's usually pretty easy to knock that ice and snow off. But man, you wouldn't believe how many times in the winter months, whenever I see people driving down the road with a little square like this, is the only part they can see out on their driver's side. It is so dangerous. You're extremely limiting your window of view. You can see right there. You can't see anybody off to the sides. So that's very dangerous. Don't do that. If you need to, whatever you got to do, maybe you need to wake up a little earlier and go out there and start that car and let it defrost. But make sure you've got those windshields clean where you can see out before you take off. So resist the urge to floor it. And this is, even if you're at a stoplight or whatever, don't get punchy with the gas. You could try to slide on you. But if you get stuck in snow, just straighten up the wheels and accelerate slowly. Avoid spinning tires, use sand or blocks under the driving wheel. But same thing, once again, best, safest route is gonna be just don't be out there. Stay home if you can. Unless it's something you absolutely gotta get out for, stay home. Those are gonna be the safest bet compared to driving in snow or ice. But if you get out there and you start sliding, what to do? Do nothing. It says avoid making sudden moves, turning the wheel. That'd be one of the worst things you do if you begin to slide, is to really jerk the wheel or overcorrect. Then you're going to spin out of control. So it says avoid making sudden moves or turning the wheel. Smoothly lift your foot off the accelerator and glide across the ice in a straight line until you find traction. A lot of times when I'm sliding, this includes hydroplaning too as well in the rain. A lot of times if you do nothing, just ride it out. More often than not, unless you're on a curve, you're probably going to go off the road. But if you're driving straight, more often than not, you will eventually catch traction. It's not going to slide down the road for a mile. So if you ride it out, most often you'll be fine. It says downshift if you're driving with a manual transmission. Brake wisely. If you begin to skid, it says burning the press on your brakes to activate the anti-lock brake system. So ABS, if your older vehicle doesn't have that, pump the brakes. You just don't want to lock them up. And then avoid spin out. If the front end sliding, steer in the opposite direction of the skid. If your back end sliding, steer in the same direction. If you just want to try to avoid spinning out. And then it says look toward where you want to go. So if you're focused on thinking about where you're going to crash, wherever you're looking, it's usually going to be the direction you're turning that wheel. And the same thing with distracted driving. Looking out the window, if you catch yourself looking out the left side of the window, I don't know, maybe it's a pretty view out there. More often than not, you're going to start drifting that direction. So whatever you're looking at is usually where you're going to wind up steering the vehicle. So it says look where you're wanting to go, not where you think about crashing. Another one, driving in the fog can be very dangerous. Same thing. Slow down. Increase follow distance. Your visibility is greatly impaired, especially in dense fog. I know you used to have to drive down Indian Road every morning to get here and around the lake some mornings. Man, it's foggy, really foggy. So in those areas, turn on your low beams, use your fog lights if you've got them, but you don't want to use your high beams. Those cause glare, make it more difficult to see what's ahead of you on the road. To ensure you're staying in the proper lane, follow the lines on the road with your eyes. It So it may be fog so dense that's, you can only see, 10 yards ahead of you. Kind of just gotta look at the lines and stay in between them. Really, same thing though, best to avoid driving in those conditions if possible. And because it is very dangerous, especially with the animals. Boy, they just can't see them on the side of the road. They'll jump out there in front of you in a heartbeat. Like you said, don't be afraid to pull over if necessary. Let that fog lift. Do it warm up. It'll clear out. These are just some flyers. Take the council on distracted driving. All right. How much are you on your phone? Before we hit this next one, do people want to volunteer to tell us how much, what their screen time is, average daily? Oh, somebody. Yeah, I couldn't get, well, last time I did this at a meeting.
Here, I'll look at that. 8 hours.
I'm gonna ask y'all this then before I pull it up. How many of y'all think you're below the national average? And 4 of y'all? Yeah, well, yeah, I guess if you don't know where to find it, if you've got an iPhone anyways, you just go to settings, and then you go to screen time, and then it'll pull up your, right there off the bat, it'll pull up your daily average. If you don't have it, yeah, so you're saying, if you don't have it turned on, it won't let you know. 5 hours.
2 hours and 47 minutes.
2 hours, 47 minutes, 5 hours. Anybody else want to say?
Oh.
No more volunteers?
This is.
Mine's an hour and 50. Anybody lower than that? Competition.
I bet Sheila's is high.
What?
Yours is high.
5 hours? Anybody else?
But people that live further away from home find it more. It's like,
Well, and too, one big thing that does keep that up is if you do have a commute, if you're listening to music through your phone or listening to a podcast, it counts that, which is kind of a little unfair. It's not like you're looking at it and, yeah, that adds a lot of time, can add a lot of time. But, no more volunteers. Nobody was, 5 hours was the highest?
well, yesterday was 8.
What's your daily average though?
5.
5, okay.
Red's still maybe like.
I think everybody's below. Yep, 5.4. So that's pretty close. Study done by Provision Living found that African Americans spend 5.4 hours a day on their phone. So everybody that volunteered was below. I'm guessing the rest of you were above. Since you know that's us. It says 13% millennials and 5% of baby boomers said they spend over 12 hours every day on their phone. That is crazy. 12 hours, I couldn't imagine. That is for so much time on your phone. But there's people out there that are definitely glued to it. And then 82% of people think their usage is lower than the national average. And it's not. It's bigger than all, but I don't think anybody was over, so y'all were pretty good on that, I guess. I don't know, not everybody said, but. And then here's a breakdown of what apps are spent on most, but Facebook and Instagram, the highest. I don't remember what the study was either. It was obviously from TikTok, because that's not on there. I know that takes up a lot of people's time these days, TikTok, so. But, kind of a good breakdown. To talk about it, cell phone usage and motor vehicle accidents. Cell phone usage has grown dramatically over the years, as everyone is aware. In 1996, cell phone subscriptions covered only 14% of the U.S. population. I remember in 96, they didn't know there was cell phones. But by 2011, that grown to 102.4%. So there's already more phones than there are people. I've got 2 right here, so I mean it makes sense. But that's crazy. That's such a short period. It's out with it 15 years. We went from 14% to over everyone having a cell phone. That's crazy. So that's a big shift, culturally. I mean, that's just a huge shift. I mean, and now everyone knows, like, use it for everything. Pay your bills with it, bank with it, you talk to people with it. That's how everyone communicates. I mean, society now is set up to where it's hard to get by without having one. It makes it really difficult to not have one. So everyone has one. And we're on them a lot during the day. Be very dangerous though if you're using it behind the wheel. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates that 9% of all drivers at any given time are using their cell phone. So this one you can do whenever you leave here. 9% will bump it up to 10. There's 1 in 10 drivers that you're crossing are on their phone. Next time, whenever you're taking off, especially down the highway, see how long it takes you to pass, or for 10 people to pass you or you pass them. Doesn't take very long. 1 in 10 of that's one person, but you, not themselves, but more importantly, you are at risk. Crazy when you start thinking about it that way and paying attention to how many people that you're passing and coming across on the road. National Safety Council estimates that 1 in 4 motor vehicle crashes involve cell phone use at the time of the crash. 25% all motor vehicle incidents. There was a cell phone. Crazy. Same thing, estimated 26% of all crashes involve cell phone use. That would account for 1.1 million crashes during that year. That's a lot. And then 12% of fatal crashes are reported to involve cell phones. And then in 2020, an estimated minimum of 160,000 crashes involved texting or emailing versus 1.1 million crashes involving talking on cell phones. So this was back in 2010, which I'd say people probably text quite a bit more now than they did in 2010. But however, the big takeaway from this is the talking on cell phones. A lot of people think that that's safer to talk than it is to send a text. But like I said, even if you've got your phone connected to your vehicle or whatever, it's not the fact of like we're texting, you're taking your eyes off the road. The talking, what you're doing, you're checking out mentally. So you're not there, you're engaged in that conversation. So then all of a sudden you're not paying as much attention to what's going on around you, to the road in front of you. And I think there's another statistic here in a second. I'll bring it back up. But that's what happens. You're checking out mentally. You're not there. You're not focused on what you're doing. You're at risk of getting into an accident. And I'll add, because I don't think it's in there, but say on average, sending a text takes 5 seconds. Your eyes are off the road for 5 seconds anyway. Traveling at 55 miles an hour, cover the length of a football field in that 5 seconds. That's 5 seconds your eyes are off the road. But a lot can happen in the distance of a football field out there on the highway if you're not looking. Especially if somebody stops in front of you, they've got someone that got to slam the brakes. So please don't be on your cell phone behind the wheel. All right, multitask. I got another video. Seen this video already. Please don't say anything to ruin it. Stay quiet if you've seen it already. You think you can multitask really well. Good. I don't know. John, the other one, he's half raised. I can multitask. Let's see. I don't know. Okay, it's after this. So you can. It's a myth. Shut me down on it. Does human brains not perform 2 tasks at the same time? It literally can't do 2 tasks at the same time. Instead, the brain handles tasks sequentially, switching between one task and another. It's really rapid, but they literally can't focus on 2 things at once. You can jump a task very rapidly, which leads to erroneous belief we're doing 2 tasks at the same time, but in reality, you're switching attention between tasks one at a time. During the vast majority of road trips, nothing bad happens, as it should be. But that also can lead people to feel a false sense of security or competency when driving. Drivers may believe they can safely multitask. However, a driver always must be prepared to respond to the unexpected. So we get this all the time, being in safety areas. Oh, it's going this way, nothing's ever happened, so it's got to be safe. That's not true. Like it says here, maybe you are on your phone all the time and you've never been in an accident. So you're greatly increasing your odds, and I don't care if you've done it 1,000 times, 100,000 times, and nothing's happened. It only takes once. It's only gotta go wrong once and change your life, just once. So it doesn't matter if you've been getting away with it, it takes once. You'll regret it. You wish you hadn't. So now, yeah, I think this video will play. I'll try to pause it at the right spot. If you've seen this, don't say anything. If not, pay attention.
The monkey business solution. The player wearing white.
Well, I guess we know I'm 16 now.
Yeah, I was saying,
How many people got it, honestly?
I was thinking, I was thinking.
Where y'all?
Start hurting anything.
Play the rest of it.
Right answer.
I can't believe we missed that.
Did you spot the gorilla?
All about half?
Didn't see that.
You didn't see it?
Heard about a video like this before, about half this gorilla.
That's spot on.
If you look, probably saw it, but did you notice the curtain changing color before the layer on the black TV?
No.
As soon as you saw the black TV, let's rewind, watch it again. Comes the gorilla, and there goes a fire, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
It's hard to believe that you could miss that after watching it back. The first time I saw it, so I missed it too.
Gorilla, you often discuss it. And that's monkey business solution.
But that is an
So more about it.
extremely good example of what I was going back talking to you earlier, just talking on the phone. You're focused on that conversation. So you're taking yourself out of what you're doing there, and you can miss things that are right in front of you. So that's why it's important to pay attention and to not be on the phone. I think it covers it here. When people attempt to perform too cognitively complex tasks such as driving time on a phone, the brain shifts its focus. People develop inattentive blindness. That is, you're looking, but you're not seeing. Important information falls out of view and is not processed by the brain. For example, drivers may not see a red light because this is a process people are not aware of. It's virtually impossible for people to realize they are mentally taking on too much. As he said, you're not going to know that it's happening to you, but estimates indicate drivers using cell phones will look at but fail to see up to 50% of the information in their driving environment. So that's huge, 50%. If you just imagine you took a snapshot of you driving down the highway and then you just started to remove pieces of that picture until like half of it was left, man, you're missing a lot of important information there. So even just talking, because I know, or at least me, I would assume that texting is more dangerous because you're physically taking your eyes off the road. But even if you're not physically taking your eyes off the road, if you're engaged in that conversation, it doesn't even have to be cell phone, honestly, just if somebody's in the passenger seat, you guys get into a deep conversation. It's a distraction. I mean, it can be, and it can lead to you not being able to process all that information that you're seeing as you're driving down the highway. So what are some other distractions? I kind of just named one right there. You know, it could be just talking to somebody in the passenger seat. What are some other ones though? Eating. Yep, eating is a huge one. Yeah, I mean, don't do that. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, that's a big one though. I read before that that's actually more dangerous than using a cell phone, eating. Where's some other ones?
I'm on fire.
Yes, that's a big one. Driving while tired, fatigue. That too, for sure, driving while significantly tired is worse than driving while impaired. And we'll say, wait, that's another one, driving while impaired. So whether it be alcohol or drug use, the big one. What else?
Kids.
Yeah. The kids for sure.
I have to pull over all the time.
Pull this car over. Maybe it was going.
Oh, it's on here. What else?
Maybe you got your dog running with you.
Yeah, could be. That, yeah. Could be crawling all over you, wants to stick his head out the window. That's, yeah. What else?
Loud music.
Yeah, can be, for sure. Get into a solid jam session, all of a sudden. Yeah. What else?
I mean, not saying I do it, but some people are watching while you're driving.
That could be, yeah. Look at the heat thing for too long, you know, other than just glancing around your environment, staring at heat thing for too long, that's gonna be a distraction. What else?
Being angry.
Yes, yep. Yeah, that's it's kinda in here, but yeah, that's going back to that, even if you're the one in the car, it's just, you're checking out mentally, and it's gonna make it harder for you to focus on what you're doing. And you're gonna start missing some of that information. What else? Yeah. It's on here. I don't do it, but I see it. About changing clothes. See that? Jackets are a big one. Get in the vehicle, start getting warmed up, and take that jacket off. It's a big one. What else? They've done really good.
Bugs in the car.
Yeah, that's happened to me before. A big old horsefly flying around with, turns into a distraction. Yep.
How about a buzzard throwing up on your car?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a distraction. That's nasty.
No, it's on the road. Most of the time, you know, they'll fly off.
Yeah.
This dude started flying right straight over the top of me and jumped at me. It's all drive. 30 minutes.
Yeah. That was, yeah, very distraction. Anybody got any other ones?
Unruly passengers.
Yeah, unruly passengers could be, get into an argument or whatever. Anybody else? Go ahead, flip through them. Maybe got most of them, but talking with passengers, getting onto your kids, or maybe you ain't getting onto them, they're just, kids are kids. You're crazy back there in the back seat, they're definitely distracted. Arguing with someone, this could be either actually arguing with someone in the vehicle, out or whoever, or like I said, just being angry, just being mad, getting. Road rage too, which is not on here, but that can turn into a distraction if you let somebody else make you mad or someone else is mad at you. Please don't engage in road rage because that's very dangerous as well. Messing with the radio, drug and alcohol use, touched on. Driving tired, mentioned, this is a big one. Eating in the car, brought up, putting on makeup. Reaching for other things in the car, so you drop something. Hopefully it's not your phone, double negative, but drop the phone in between the seats, things like that. Dropping anything, reaching over, having to grab it, bend down, those can be very dangerous, trying to grab something. And changing clothes, I think it's all of those got listed here, we named off several other ones, but all those can be distractions. All right, now. This video is not graphic at all, it's fairly emotional, it's supposed to be anyways. I guess a disclaimer, if anybody didn't want to watch it for whatever reason, that would be the time to go. But we'll go ahead and play it.
Mayhander.
I've actually, this is about a 4-minute video. Please, restroom.
My name is Becky.
My Grace. She's my everything. She's the greatest gift that life can give. She's what makes life so beautiful. So fulfilling. See my little girl smile. It's all that I live for. It's taken away from me. What's the point for her? I would give everything I have to see that beautiful smile. Just once. Yeah.
I really didn't have to use bathroom. I can't already watch that anymore. That stuff, I came in at the worst part. That is really hard for me. But that is based on a true story. They changed some of it, but I actually looked into it. That the actual story of what happened. Did it have to say his name? Okay, I don't remember his real name. We'll just say it was Jason. So, Jason is actually, I believe, a girl, but he just had a son. I don't remember, he was only a few months old. He's less than a year old. It was in Texas where it happened. I don't remember the exact city, but it was in Texas. And it was a girl that hit him. I think that is what she was doing, was no makeup, ran red light at an intersection, hit, one of the vehicles got thrown into them. And I mean, it's not much you could do to if you're adjacent, then it's just, I said bad luck, terrible luck, but from the girl's side, that 100% could have been prevented. You definitely don't want to be that reason. So, and then following that, this guy, here's the actual guy that happened to, that was him with his son. Then this was him, I don't remember if it was 5 or 6 years later. He was in Texas, as in the case with most marriages when there's also a child. Him and his wife get a divorce. He moves to California. Seemingly goes off the deep end, gets on drugs, and then was arrested, detained for getting into a shootout with the cops. I don't know, I'm just speculating, but obviously that extremely hard time messed his life up, because before that, he was apparently a pretty stand-up guy, had a stable job, obviously married, just had a kid, and then got hooked on drugs. Him and his wife split up, and then, I don't know, but I assume he's probably trying to suicide by cop. So, I mean, just that one slip of that girl, not paying attention, completely changed that life. And hers. I don't know exactly how it played out for her, but if you had, outside of what happens to you legally, if you had a conscience at all, it'd be hard to live with that. So, that's it though for this. Does anybody have any questions on that? Here's a couple of links for additional information and statistics, but no questions? Ran over time, so everybody's probably ready to go. All right, that's all I got then.
My name is Mitch Bright. I've seen some of you on the video the last couple of years, but I'm glad to be in person for a change. That video stuff, that's hard to teach that way. Because we like to get some sort of feedback, at least somebody nodding their head or something. You don't even get that video. It's nice to be in person. Unfortunately, Mark's not here today, but he's still in the office. He doesn't get out a whole lot, so we go out and bear with our jokes. So this is super.
Yeah, so Travis Hooper, kind of new to the education department, so I'm here with you guys for the first time, but I'm excited to be here. It may not be as good looking as Mark, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of stand in well for him, so.
Talking about the
We're gonna find somebody with more hair.
Yeah.
Travis to help us out. So we're gonna start off with CPR demo, and how many of you have taken CPR 5% time, I believe? So nothing's really changed on CPR. They're trying to make it as easy as possible because you're in a really stressful situation. It's hard to remember all new numbers and things like that. So the numbers are pretty much stay the same. So we'll go through the adult CPR, we'll go through the use of the AD, talk about choking as well. After that, we'll get into first aid topics. So this is your class. If you'll have questions about anything, just let us know, but let's kick it off. So we'll talk about adult CPR. For us, an adult is considered anybody above 8 years of age. That covers most of the people that we would take care of. So when you talk about cardiac arrest, it's when somebody has stopped breathing and their heart has stopped beating. So we're going to do the work of beating their heart for them and providing that breathing for them as well. So it's so important to have people out there in the community that know how to do CPR, because on average, across the United States, it takes EMS about 14 minutes to respond to an emergency. And after about 4 to 6 minutes of somebody not breathing, brain cells start to die. And after about 10 minutes of somebody being in cardiac arrest, if nobody started anything, their chance of survival really diminishes. So it's great to have people out there that are willing to stop and render CPR or first aid. So I'm glad y'all are here. I realize you have to be here, but I'm still glad you're here. So, but the adult, take care of them, and we'll talk about the child in a bit as well. But when an adult collapses, the first thing that we want to think about is our own safety. we got to think for a second, what has put them into this situation, and is it something that's going to harm me? So take a second or two to see if there's any smoke or anything in the environment that's going to hurt you. So just take a second to do that. And that's vitally important. If you have more than one victim on the ground, there's a good reason to do that. It's probably not a good time for you to be there. So take yourself first, and then take care of the victim after that. So once we've determined that everything is safe, we're going to approach the victim, and we're going to try to get a response from them. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that. We can do the old shake and chow. So, hey, you okay? Try to get a response from them. So the whole time we're doing that, we're looking for any movement from the victim. We're looking for any grimacing on their face. Something to tell us that this person is going to respond to us. If they respond to us, then they don't need CPR, at least at this very moment. So we're trying to get that response. We have to add a little bit of painful stimuli to that as well to see if we can respond. So nothing crazy, you can't slap them around or anything, but you can take your knuckles right there in the center of the chest. Has anybody ever grabbed you and scalp your knob? A little bit painful. So we do that right in the center of the chest. I prefer to grab that large muscle in their neck and squeeze that. Anybody's ever squeezed that one, it's pretty painful. And that's a little more discreet than right up somebody's chest. So I'll just pinch that one. Check the response. The whole time I'm doing that, I'm looking at their face, seeing if there's any grimacing or any movement from them. And we're also looking for any chest rise and fall. So we're doing that simultaneously. So if they're breathing on their own, we're talking about breathing and we're rise and fall the chest, then again, they don't need CPR at this very moment. Now, occasionally when somebody first goes into cardiac arrest, they will have what's called agonal respirations. And so just every few seconds, they'll just gasp for air, just every one of those. It's not normal breathing. It's only 2 or 3 times per minute. If you see that, that still means that they need CPR. It's just that their brain is still trying to do everything it can to keep them alive. It's just not enough at this moment. So when you see no breathing at all, or they're just doing that respirations, then we'll regard that as needing CPR. So after we get that response, then we're going to call 911. So if you're by yourself and you have to leave the victim, we're going to do it straight away. Leave them, call 911, come back to it. Now, if there's people around to call for you, send somebody else. And if you're in a large group of people, it's best to single somebody else. So you go call 911. Because in a large group, either everybody assumes somebody else called, or the whole group calls at one time. One's like you. So single somebody out. And if you know there's an AED in the area, have them grab an AED as well. We'll talk about the use of that. Pretty straightforward. So get that response on the way, and then we're going to come back to the victim. We're going to start CPR. So when we start CPR, the victim has to be on a hard, flat surface. Most of the time, that's going to be on the floor. So however you can do them on the floor, we're going to get them there. If they're in bed or if they're in an easy chair, if we're trying to do compressions on them, we're not compressing the chest, because what we're trying to do, the heart is situated between the breastbone and the backbone. So what we're trying to do is squeeze that heart in between those structures and squeeze blood out. If they're on a mattress or they're in an easy chair, we're just compressing the mattress, and we're not doing what we really need to do to save that person's life. So get them on the floor, even if they're a lot bigger than you, however you can do it, just drag them off into the floor. We're not worried about hurting them, because if we don't get CPR started, they're not going to survive this thing. So get them on the floor, expose the chest, so we can see where we're going to do the chest compressions. If you're in the middle of Walmart, kind of think about that privacy, try to keep protected as much as we can, but expose the chest, and then we're ready to do our chest compressions. So the chest compressions are just going to be right in the center of the chest. You probably remember years ago, we would like measure from down here and slide our finger up, and kind of that, just right in the center of the chest. So we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. So once you start the compressions, what we're going to do is get leaned over the top of the victim, and you want to lock your elbows in so that you're using your upper body weight to do those compressions instead of just trying to use your arm muscles to do those compressions. If you try to use just your arm muscles, you're going to tire out really quickly. So lean over the top of them, lock your elbows in, and then use your upper body weight. Now, how you're comfortable, whatever heel whichever hand you want, place that down first, and then you can lock the fingers of the other hand in or grab your wrist, whatever is more comfortable for you. Because you may be doing this for a little while. So place your hand there, however you want to do that, and then start with compressions. Now, our motto when we do our compressions is to push hard, push fast. So we want to compress at a rate of 100 to 120 compressions per minute. So that's moving fairly quickly. Remember, they used to say, things upon staying alive, silently to yourself, right? And none of the hand gestures. So, but that song is about 100 beats per minute. We want to be a little bit faster than that, and kind of the song that I wanted to push out now, Baby Shark. Right. Me, I can't sing and do compressions at the same time anyway. So it's all about getting a good compression rate going. So trying to maintain a fairly quick rate. And we're wanting to compress at least 2 inches on the adult's chest. So we're compressing fairly easy. And the question always arises, what do I do if we break a rib? And that is possible to break a rib. It's very, very rare that that happens. But I'll tell you, when you first start doing compressions, you'll feel a lot of cracking and popping. And what that typically is the cartilage that surrounds the breastbone and the ribs will cause that cracking and popping. So it's not actually ribs that are breaking, it's just that cartilage. But at the end of the day, you can survive a broken rib. You're not going to survive your heart not beating. So whether you think you've broken a rib or not, just keep going. Just do it as long as you can. So each time we do the compressions, we're going to do 30 compressions, and then we're going to give 2 breaths after that. Now, if it's a close friend or family member, you're not going to hesitate to get mouth to mouth. But if you're in the middle of Walmart and somebody drops in front of you and you don't know them, some folks are going to be a little bit reluctant to stop and do mouth to mouth with somebody like that, and understand that. So if you find yourself in that situation, at least stop and just do straight chest compressions until somebody else shows up. When an adult goes into cardiac arrest, they do it suddenly, and they typically have a bit of oxygen reserve left in their body. So by us doing chest compressions, we're still circulating oxygen around the body. And by doing those compressions, we do pull a little bit of air into the lungs. So you're still doing that victim some good by doing those chest compressions. So everybody agree to at least stop and do some chest compressions. We're going to incorporate the breathing, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So when we do the compressions, 30 compressions, it'll look something like this. We'll do our 30 compressions. After that, if you're not going to do the breathing, just continue those compressions. If we're going to include the breathing, though, we'll do the 30 compressions, and then we'll take care of the airway breathing. So when we do that, we want to protect ourselves if you can. So they make different devices. The pocket mask is a good tool. It just pops out, has a one-way valve there. They also make a little shield that you can find. These actually, you can find some that are folded up into like a little keychain, but you just want something to provide a barrier between you and that victim. Now, the chances of you catching something by doing mouth to mouth is really, really slim, but it's still good to kind of protect yourself in that.
And a lot of times with these two, I can be able to add with the impedance device works out really well. Because unfortunately, as you can imagine, when somebody does go into cardiac arrest in front of you, they will have some secretions at times. If it's not just saliva, they can end up having whatever they end up having for lunch, breakfast, or the mixture of the two. Also too, a way to be able to handle that, if you notice that in EMS, we would utilize suction for situations such as this, but if we want to be able to clear that airway, we can be able to just roll the patient over to the side and be able to get that, let gravity do the work for us and clear the secretions. And then we can be able to utilize this device with that impedance device, which is what this is.
Yeah. And then it's, if they vomit and you roll them back, if if you were excited about doing mouth to mouth before, you probably won't be. Yeah, try to get that out of their mouth the best you can. You know, when we give our breaths, we want just enough air to see chest rise, and that's all they ever want to put in the lungs. If we try to put too much air in there, if we try to blow too forcefully, some of it's going to go in the lungs and the rest of it's going to go in the belly. And you actually start to see it distend until what Travis says, it just starts coming. So, like you want to do, that's what they want to
Oh, absolutely. I was concerned about that for a second. So when we utilize this, we're gonna place a patient's head, you know, we're always in a neutral position when they're sitting, when they're laying back, but we're gonna tilt them back a little bit. So we're gonna hold on, and then I'm going to tilt the patient's head back. And just enough until I can be able to see the chest rise. If you remain a little bit closer, you can be able to see that. I don't know if you folks be able, in the back, be able to see that. But we're gonna give those 2 breaths until we can see the chest rise, and no more is needed with that. So, but we'll do that whenever you have either yourself there with you, you're doing your chest compressions. So I'm gonna go to 30, and then I'm going to, as quick as I can, give those 2 breaths until I see chest rise.
Go straight back into chest compressions. And we want to be moving fairly quickly when we do that. We don't want to interrupt chest compression for more than 10 seconds at a time. So go from your compressions to breathing back to the compressions quickly. And we're going to end up doing 5 cycles of 30 compressions and 2 ventilations before we reevaluate the patient. So what we'll do is finish with the chest compressions, give 2 breaths, and then we're going to look at the victim again, see if there's any movement. We can apply that painful stimuli again, see if they respond. If they don't, we go straight back into CPR. Let's continue that. One thing about the chest compressions is we want to do a good job of compressing the chest, but we also want to allow the chest to come back to its normal shape, because as we compress the heart down, we're squeezing blood out. We also want it to return to its normal shape so that it can refill with blood so we can compress it again. So when you start to get tired, we have a tendency to start leaning on the chest because you're just wanting to break. So just make sure that chest comes back to its normal shape. And if you have somebody else there that knows CPR, it's a good idea every couple of minutes to try it out, because it gets pretty hard. Now, at first, your adrenaline's going to be flowing, so you might not recognize that you're getting tired. After a couple of minutes, you're nearly as efficient as you were that first 2 minutes. So change out if you can every couple of minutes. So these questions over CPR.
On the 2 breaths,
Yeah. Just get that breath, and it doesn't take long for the air to escape and give her extra rest. So we'll do a full cycle here in a second and show you what that looks like. So, questions thus far?
If you were in a desolate area, how long would you do this?
Yeah, good question. And it's really, you can only go as long as you can, right? So you're just going to keep it up the best you can, but at the end of the day, you just can't go longer. And that's just a decision that you're going to have to make on your own, whether you can continue or not. And I say don't feel bad if you can't go on any longer. Of course, you're going to feel bad about it, but so hopefully help gets there fairly quickly. Where you are.
Me, I'm gonna write that.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate in most places to have first responders that can hopefully, and they get there a lot quicker than we do, so they can take over CPR if they need. But it still may be a little off for you, so just do the best you can. Well, so we're gonna go to a cycle of this. So you want to do the correct? Yeah, I'll do it.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
What do you suspect like a neck injury?
Yeah, that's a good question. And at this point, it's life over limb. So we're not going to worry too much about that neck injury. Again, they can typically survive that. So we're gonna do CPR the best we can. It's something that you'll at least think about. Try to keep them as still as possible. But at the end of the day, it's more important to get CPR in there. Okay.
If you can just maintain it in somewhat of a position to where it's not going to jar the either side, as long as, if you can get it to go in that neutral position backwards, the likelihood of you making a injuring the patient there afterwards is gonna be fairly low, so.
So we'll go from the position, say where I'm in Walmart or something of that sort, or a populated area, and Mitchell and I are, out and about. We walk see a patient that goes down in front of me. I go up to the patient, they appear to be unresponsive. I take and shout, grab the patient, use sternal rub, whatever. They do not respond. Open up their airway. So I'm trained to check their pulse. In this particular case, if the patient's unresponsive, we're assuming that they do not have a pulse. I open their airway, look, listen, feel for breathing while assessing for a pulse, and they have neither at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and call 911 or have somebody call 911 at that point, if Mitch, you can get the AED, not start chest compressions.
We'll say this is the end of our fifth cycle here, so he'll finish that and give us 2 breaths. Anyway, and we'll see if there's any changes. Pretty straightforward. And you're gonna be pretty excited during all this, so if you get there and you can't remember those numbers, then if you can remember to start testing freshmen, start there. And then hopefully it's calm down, you can start to go. It's hard to think of anything in a situation like that. So, another question that we get frequently is what happens if I stop and render CPR the first aid and somebody sue me? The outcome's not good or something like that. Anybody can sue you for anything, but there's a Good Samaritan Act that protects you. If you're not being paid as a professional rescuer, if you stop and just render CPR first aid, they cannot bring a successful incident against you. So you don't have to worry about litigation in those situations, unless you just do something crazy, like cutting a neck, cutting a hole in your neck, putting a bolt in the neck. That's not good.
They say, look, I saw on Grey's Anatomy and the guy.
And basic first responders, they're injured. You said.
If they're not being paid for it, no, they typically, they're protected as well. But it's just, nurses and physicians and medics that are paid, we can be sleeping.
What about environmental people?
No, you don't. You're safe. Yeah, anything you saw on Grey's Anatomy, don't do it. That's the same bit. So, some questions about all right, we'll talk about the AED. Do you all have an AED in most of the places that you work? Is there one here in this building? We'll take that as a no.
There's one at the gym.
Well, I must have missed it when I was there. The AED is great. Now, CPR is what this person needs initially, so we'll get CPR started, but what really improves that patient's chance of survival is defibrillation. And so what typically happens when a person goes into cardiac arrest is their heart goes into a rhythm where it's just quivering, it's not pumping, it's designed to do. So what the defibrillation does is stop that chaotic rhythm that the heart is in, so hopefully it can go back into its normal beating rhythm. So that's what we're hoping. So ideally, we're going to start CPR within just a couple minutes of collapsing, and then we're going to hook up the AED as early as possible. So it's nice to have these, maybe something to consider putting in your office, to have one close. But I always tell people, if you have the option of where you go to cardiac arrest, because casino is probably your best bet, because you're sitting there playing the machine, security's watching you all the time, you collapse, they're on top of you just in a couple seconds with an AED, and they're living that first shock within just minutes, so that's your best chance. Probably your best, really. So,
Do you recommend people having one of those in their homes?
it's kind of hard to get in your home. They do. I mean, you can find them on eBay, and other than that, you have to have a physician's order for them. And they're fairly expensive. I looked at some the other day, and the cheaper ones that I found were $1,400.
So we'll have
If you had somebody in the home that had a sensitive cardiac, it's pretty much a good idea. And they actually make vets now that they sometimes send home with people that does it automatically, which you think somebody wants to sit there all of a sudden. We see it, but they'll put in pacemakers nowadays, they typically do a defibrillator along with it. And we get called fairly for these people just get shocked. Most of the time it's because they need it, but occasionally those things kind of get haywire. They get shocked for no good reason. So, but it is fairly expensive. But they're easy to use. Now, there's a lot of different AD manufacturers out there, and the AD stands for automated external defibrillator. So the AD does most of the work, but there's a good chance that if you ever have to use one, that it won't look exactly like this one. But they all operate in a similar fashion. So the hardest part about using one is turning the thing on. So either it's going to have an on button for the part on the device, or like this one, flip on it. So that's the toughest part. So turn the device on, and it's going to tell you everything to do from that point. So just listen to it. We have some newer ADs at the office now that say stay calm when it first comes on. Somebody told me that. I wouldn't have thought. Just turn the AD on, listen to those voice prompts. So what's going to tell you first of all is to either plug the pads in. So some of the pads you have to plug in, and it'll be pretty easy to tell where you plug those pads in. It's going to tell you to open the package, so we fill them open and then fill the pads out. They're super sticky when they first come out of the package. We want that. We want these to adhere to the chest as tight as possible, because we want as much electricity to travel through these pads as possible to convert that heart rhythm. And so you pull the pads out. They're made for paramedics. They have pictures on them. Nice. So it tells you exactly where to put the pad. And it doesn't matter, because we have two pads. It doesn't matter which one you put where. One's going to go right up here and right up her chest. One's going to go left lower chest over here. So place those pads there. Once the pads are on, the device itself will typically determine that those are on, and it'll say, do not touch victim analyzing rhythm. So there's a computer chip within this thing that tells you, or it takes what rhythm the heart is in, and it says whether to give a shock or not. There's some rhythms that the patient may be in cardiac arrest that they don't recommend shocking. So if it detects a rhythm like that, what it's going to say is no shock advised, continue CPR. So we're going to leave the pads exactly where they are. We're going to do 2 minutes of CPR. At the end of the 2 minutes, the device will tell you again to do not touch victim analyzing the rhythm. So just do whatever it tells you to. If it identifies a rhythm that could shock, it'll say charging, and then it'll tell you when to shock that patient. So there'll be a on button on there. So we'll let this thing go through its deal. Now, ideally, the way that we do this is somebody is doing chest compressions while somebody else is applying the pads around them. We want to continue CPR as long as we can, but if you're the only one there that has any idea how to use one of these, then put this AED on as quickly as possible and then get back to chest compressions when it tells you to do so. Let's do a round of this. You want to put it on?
It's really fun taking off hairy people.
Yeah. So I was going to talk about that, but it's a good time to mention that. Occasionally, you'll have somebody with a lot of chest hair, and these pads don't always stick really well when they have a lot of hair. So a lot of the ADs will have a pin attached to it that has a razor in there. So just take a second to shave off that spot. Don't shave your initials, nothing like that. and put those. The other option is if you have a couple of pads and you don't have a razor, put the pads on, and if they're not sticking really well, grab one, or rip it off. But, yeah, if they flinch, they don't need the AED. But just put a new set of pads there. Good to go. So we'll talk about another few things here in just a minute, but I'll let Travis go through the whole steps here.
Okay, so the chest compressions, we've got the AED placed on, we're open.
I didn't think it was
So, in case you go down and witness them, I'm going to check for responsiveness. Hey, you okay? Start up with them. Head tilt, chin lift, look this and feel for breathing. On assessing the pulse, I find that there's neither. So I'm going to go ahead and have somebody call 911, have somebody grab an AED. I'm going to start chest compressions. Oh, thank you. Would you mind taking over chest compression after this next cycle? And I'll place the AED on the patient.
It'll run this remote sheets.
Okay.
We'll do one hand in CPR, not reps. Not CPR. Set it up.
He's on the phone with one hand. So as he's doing CPR, I'm placing it. Okay, got it.
Really redundant.
Hold on just a second. Charging. So it's just at this point, sharp, okay, the patient, the patient on, give the shock. Whenever you do that, delivery shock, be prepared for the patient to jolt a slight bit. Obviously, you don't end up touching the patient inadvertently or intentionally whenever you are defibrillating the patient. They're worried with that is that some of that energy could transfer to you. So we don't want any of that to happen accidentally. So another things to be considered about too, or whenever you're doing this, so say you're at the city pool or something like that, and the patient has gone to cardiac arrest and you're to a possible drowning. You want to be able to, the best you can, wipe away some away that sweat. It shouldn't cause it to arc. I always like to be a little bit more safe than that. So you should have a towel around or somebody's shirt or whatnot, be able to wipe that free. But also too, make sure, because I recall when I was working in Tulsa for a bit of time, we had a drowning patient and, you don't expect this from a professional, but one of unfortunately, the victim's feet were still inside the pool and they were charging that thing up. And so we're like, hold on, guys. And so we always like to make that joke and burn whatever keeps them firing and stuff like that. So, but
Nothing against fire.
yeah, no, it is fire. But we had that experience before. If it was, the remedy was made. It's one of those things that can happen to anybody, if you're not paying attention. So just be aware of those things. I've also had, I've heard of it kind of arcing one time. The patient was where this had kind of gotten loose and there was a bunch of dew. This was on like a soccer field, that kind of thing in the morning. So be aware of those things.
So do you want the box beside them or could it be on top of them? Like-
It doesn't whatever the space allows. Sometimes you don't always. Most of the cardiac arrests that we work are in a small bedroom, very little space, and you just gotta find a spot. So, yeah. Yeah. And the other thing with the water is the electricity likes to follow the path of least resistance, right? So instead of going through the chest wall, if there's water standing on the chest, that electricity is going to go through that. So.
Let me ask a weird question, because I'm the kind of person who screw something like this up. So say you check for a pulse, and I'm not the greatest pulse checker on earth, right? And there was none, so I hooked that up. What if they did have a pulse and you did that?
It's not going to allow, there's some safety features built.
Okay, I wouldn't want to stay pulse.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
And typically, you know, to be realistic, it's usually easy to tell when somebody's in. You know, the coloration is going to be totally off. They're not moving, they're not breathing, so don't worry about it. But that is brings up a good point that if you're not sure, it's better to start chest compressions because it's not going to hurt them if we do chest compressions. And we know this for a fact because every summer we get called down to the river for cardiac arrest, and we get down there and there's a group of people holding somebody down trying to do chest compressions on them, and there's usually a lot of alcohol. When reminded that if you have to hold them down, you probably don't see them. Those people are perfectly fine. They have a little chest discomfort, but so it's better to start CPR if you're not sure than withhold CPR when a person actually needs it started. Again, if at some point you have to hold them down, let's just continue that part of it. But the AD has a lot of safety features. So it's going to take any movement, anything like that. So don't hesitate to use one of these. It's going to talk you through it. So just try to stay calm and go through the steps that it tells you to do. Some other considerations for this, if you see an implanted device underneath the skin, don't put the pads directly over it. Typically, the pacemaker is going to be on the left-hand side, so it's not an issue, but sometimes you see an implanted port on the right-hand side, so don't put this directly over it. Just move it down slightly on the chest, and you're good to go. If while you're putting this on, you see any medication patches on the chest, we want to remove those because they tend to heat up and cause burns if we send electricity through there. So take them off, but remember that medication is designed to absorb through your skin. So don't touch the underside of the patch if you can avoid it. Sometimes the effect will be good, sometimes you don't want to take your chance. Questions about the AED? What's
So let me make it one.
Yeah.
How many times can you use it, or is it just a one-time thing and it's been?
You can use it over and over. The pads, if you were going to use them with somebody else, of course, you'd have to get new pads, but they're reusable. They have a battery that lasts for several years in there. As far as one patient, I deliver 9 shocks to an individual patient for the remaining shock. So you just keep going and going. So yeah, that's the one downside about maintaining these AEDs. The batteries for this particular model, and this model is not being sold anymore, but their batteries are about $400. So they last a couple of years, but you end up having to throw the battery away. Don't throw it away in the trash. I don't have to tell you all that, right? Dispose of it properly. But yeah, it's a little bit expensive to maintain an AED, but they're worth it. Let's talk about choking in the adult patient. So typically with adult patients, we see is they sit around the table, joking and laughing, and all of a sudden they grow quiet. And they tend to grab their throat. That's just the universal sign for choking. They don't have to do this, but they generally do. And y'all can imagine if you start choking in public, you're going to be probably a little bit embarrassed about it. So oftentimes people will get up and run to the bathroom. So if you see somebody jump up, grab their throat, run to the bathroom, you might check on them, make sure they're okay. But if you see them choking, the first thing we're going to do is ask them if they're choking. Now, if they can speak, then they're not truly choking. Or if they're coughing and they can actually make noise, they're able to clear that airway better than we are. So we're just going to encourage them to keep coughing until they can clear that obstruction. But if they can't speak, they're not making any noise, the next question that we need to ask them is if we can help them. It sounds crazy, this person is potentially choking to death, and we have to ask for permission. But as long as an adult patient is conscious, we have to ask for permission. So ask them, and 99.9% of the time, they're going to say yes and go to work. That other 0.1%, if they refuse, we're just going to encourage them to allow us to help them until they pass out. Once they pass out, they're fair game. If they allow us to help them, do a stand by, and we're going to stand behind them, and we're going to brace ourselves in case that object doesn't come out. They're going to pass out at some point. So you want to brace yourself in case that happens. So just put the leg between theirs. We're gonna find their belly button, release the top of their pant line. We're gonna make a fist with their thumb in towards the belly, place that there, grab it with the other hand, and we're gonna pull in and out towards our head. We're not pulling straight back, the boom is actually pulling up against the diaphragm. We're one foot pressure there so that we can hopefully force that object out of the airway. So we're just gonna do in and out as hard as we can, about her, in and out. Over and over again until either the object comes up or they feel conscious. Most of the time, that's all it takes to get the object out. But whether the object comes up or they go unconscious, you want to call help at that point. Just to get them evaluated. If they go unconscious, what we'll do is, as gentlemen as we can, we're going to guide them down to the ground and we're going to start CPR. We're going to do our chest compressions. The only thing that changes is every time I come up to give a breath, I'm going to look in the mouth, see the object. If I can see it in there, I'm going to scoop behind it, scoop it out, and then breath, go back into the CPR. So that's the only change. Start CPR, look in the mouth. Just be careful, because when you put your finger in there, you don't want to push the object further down the airway. Get behind it like that. Hopefully the black is good after that. Questions will show
You ever been
me. We go with that pretty extensively in school. Don't put your fingers in somebody's mouth if there's any chance that they're still conscious or seizing. And we'll talk about seizures here in a little bit. You want to watch your fingers in there. So one question is, what if you're by yourself and you start choking? There's not great options, I'm afraid. But if you grab the back of the chair, corner of a table, something where you can thrust yourself in the abdomen, thrust yourself on that, try to get enough pressure, leave that object. They had talked about one time having people kneel down on their knees and just do a belly flop on the ground, try to leave that object. So if you keep your wits about you and think about that, I think it's something to try. Like I said, don't have too many options. But occasionally you'll have a patient that's too big to get your arms around. And if you see that, what you do is either have them seated or put them up against a wall in the same place we were doing our chest compressions before, we're in the chest thrust. So they're straight back on the chest, trying to get enough force in to relieve that object. We do the same thing if they can't stand up or if they're pregnant. Obviously pregnant, we don't want to press over the fetus. So what we'll do is get them down in a chair, get underneath their arms, and then the chest thrust straight back on the chest. It's not ideal, but it's the best we can do in those situations. So, anything to add?
You guys have any questions about that?
So let's talk briefly about child CPR. Child is anybody from 1 to 8 years of age. And the steps typically don't change a whole lot for them. The only thing that kind of changes is when we call for help for a child. If you're taking care of a child and you see them collapse in front of you, the same rules apply. So we're going to try to get a response from them. If we don't get a response, we're going to leave that patient right away to call for help. And this again is only by yourself and have to leave them. But if we need to, we'll leave them straight away and come back and start CPR. That changes though if you come into the room, find them already laying on the ground, you don't know how long they've been there. What we'll do is do our quick response and start 2 minutes of CPR before we leave. The reason being is kids typically go into cardiac arrest because of airway or breathing problem. So for them, it's important to get that oxygen started before we feed them. So if you keep your wits about you and remember that, do 2 minutes of CPR. Again, if there's people around that can call for you, have it straight away and call for help. Everything else pretty much stays the same. Still 2 hands on the compressions. The rate is the same, 30 to 200 to 120 compressions per minute. When we do the breathing, still got to get those breaths. We should mention if you're doing just straight mouth-to-mouth ventilation, what we're going to do is still tilt the head back. We tilt the head back because the tongue tends to fall to the back of the throat and include the airflow. So tilt the head back, that pulls the tongue off the back of the throat. Pinch their nose, make a seal around their mouth with our mouth, and just give those 2 breaths, those 2 gentle breaths to them. So we'll do that. The parking lots, the other class there, of that kid is the same. Babies are a little different. Anybody have anybody less than 1 year of age? You imagine adrenaline flows a little bit stronger when you're dealing with kids, but for a baby, you can still use the heel of one hand to do the compressions right there to the chest. The other method is we actually wrap our hands around the baby's chest and squeeze the chest that way. So basically place your thumb right in the center of the chest and do a compression. Of that, the numbers stay the same, 30 to 2 days as well. Which is about childhood and March along.
Wake.
Take a minute, stretch your leg, come back and talk about first aid.
Yes, sir. Get under my horse, I'm so young. That's what they had said. Did you? Yeah. I don't even what to say. The end one said go.
But I mean, we decided something. What happened?
We're gonna do something till 5 anyway.
Then you gotta go.
You have to move the camera in a lot. We don't typically film 1 or 2 things.
We're done.
Yeah.
Crazy. They actually are to do that. Once.
I did.
Okay. Over there. So you want to make sure you don't make movies or calls off.
No, it's good.
Because they, when they were on that big table and they moved to this other table here, so I want to make sure we got a video for the
Yeah.
first little step.
We didn't.
It's already, it's sort of.
Types of questions in the chat or if you have any.
Yeah, all that training.
We're not saying. There's a subscribe button.
He like, I was here doing neat. There was time when my daughter, we were eating and I went there like, hit the subscribe and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
no.
Remember what you watched, they want you to get that subscribe button.
One hard time to feel when something.
You'll come there and you go, I help you fix my car. And I didn't subscribe, and then probably in my inbox.
He's called me.
But then you can't unsubscribe, you try everything in the world, you can't unsubscribe. Jack, your friend, you go all over the place, and then you're in
Right.
an excavator, or where, you know.
You wonder what the
One minute you're right, and they tell you 20 million, and you're not right.
Yeah.
My algorithm goes.
That's farther down the line.
We're always doing DIY stuff.
think they're waiting on you, Jason. Brad, he's probably talking with somebody. He should be. I'm looking for
Get back to the office. Well, this is-
yeah, so he's probably. So you guys do this training, do you do it different ones or do you? Paramedic step through
Yeah.
the week and this when you get a chance, or how does that work?
Yeah, essentially that, we teach, we've got an EMT class going on right now, advanced EMT and paramedic.
So that's pretty involved.
Yeah, paramedic program to the last couple of years,
Yeah.
EMT about 6 months, so we'll have those kids for a while.
Yeah.
We, did a little airway class this morning, and came over here, and so it's always something
Yeah.
different and new to people, so. I like getting out of the office.
Yeah.
So, you have a class in New Mexico. Yeah.
They're always asking when I'm gonna have the 8 hour back out there again, because they always want, because those guys don't get to, they don't come to anything. They come to the conference, but go for a 1 day class, they lose it. Some days sometimes we bring the classes out there. We haven't been because of COVID, we probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always talk me into going to Santa Fe. It's hard, not really hard to do.
Give us a little per diem, we'll go wherever we want.
Yeah. Well, except for maybe, it's hot out there in the summer.
Yeah. Would be door, winter time would be.
You guys want to go ahead and get started? Those are just two guys from our office here. They're probably working. Yeah, and you got to understand Jason,
Yeah.
he's probably working.
You'll get into,
They'll catch up.
yeah, we'll get into the first aid step, and so, like I said, if you have questions, if there's certain topics that we're not covering, to just let us know. So the first thing we'll talk about is, again, protecting yourself anytime we're rendering aid, we'll make sure you're safe, and part of that is protecting yourself from blood and other body fluids. So when you do that, it's important to have some gloves with you before you start touching somebody that's bleeding. So protect yourself. If there's a lot of blood, we recommend some type of eye protection as well. So put some glasses on to protect yourself. And then from there, it's all about the equipment that you have available and what you can do. So you can put together a first aid kit fairly easily and fairly cheaply. You can buy a really extensive first aid kit from these manufacturers, but most of the stuff in there, you're never going to use. A lot of it we don't recommend using either. So if you're going to put one together yourself, I wouldn't put a lot of burn sprays and stuff like that. We just don't recommend that. So put your gloves and stuff like that in there. You want some bandaging material. So we like roller gauze. This particular brand is called Curlex, but you can find other types, but it's just a gauze that you can wrap around something, some other pieces of gauze. These are just 4x4 inch piece of gauze, and they work really well to stop bleeding. You can, if you want to do supplementation, we'll talk about here in a little bit. These triangular bandages are kind of handy to have around to do a lot of different things. And this is a commercially made bandage. It's called the Israeli bandage. It comes from the Israeli Defense Force, but it's if you're really into taking care of trauma patients, it works well. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. If you're out in the wilderness quite a bit, it's good to have some kind of splint material. This is called a sand splint. It's just basically aluminum. It's wrapped with foam, so you can bend that wherever you want to. We'll demonstrate that here a little bit. So that's nice to have some type of a blanket, those little space blankets that kind of hold it up, little silver blankets. Those work really well. They conserve heat, and if you're, out in the wilderness, if you like firearms and things like that, commercially made tourniquets pretty nice. This is the combat application tourniquet. This is what all our service members carry. On them, they work really well. It's not the only one out there, but it's the most prevalent. These are fairly expensive. They're about $30. You want to buy the actual cat brand. There are some the knockoffs out there, and they're really bad about this windlass. We'll kind of talk about here a little bit. The windlass breaks, knockoff brands fairly easily, and that's kind of an integral part of the tourniquet there. So, what else?
If you wanted to use one of those pocket masks and you'd be able to put one of those in each device, that's something that applicable to you. That's something you can end up doing, replacing in your kit as well. It's really going to be based on kind of what, it's going to be tailored to you, you know, what I may use is going to be a little bit different than what you may use. And if you want a little bit more information about what, you know, you may come into contact with, what may be more applicable to you, you can definitely talk about it for sure. So.
We'll get into some traumatic type injuries. And probably the most common one that we experience as far as trauma is concerned, bleeding. And so most of the bleeding that we see is fairly easy to control. Most of it's not arterial in nature. So what you see when somebody scrapes their skin, you know, you get a little bit of blood there on the surface of the skin from an abrasion. Those are pretty superficial. That you just put something over the top of it. You have a 4-buck piece of gauze, put that over it, really easy to control. Venous bleeding, when they actually get into one of the blood vessels, those can bleed quite a bit, but it's still just oozing blood. It gets to be a little bit darker in color. It's just oozing out. It's not actually squirting out. Those we will apply a little bit of direct pressure with our gauze and just put pressure over that wound, hold it there for a couple of minutes. That tends to stop that bleeding. From there, you can wrap it up.
So let's say here over here, he's got an injury or whatnot, say he's over here, and there's some bleeding that I end up seeing. What I'm gonna end up doing is placing some direct pressure. Surely I'm gonna have my PPE on, so I'm not gonna have this without any gloves, whatnot. Hopefully it's venous bleeding, and in this particular case, the direct pressure should be the trick to be able to stop the bleed or at least subside at the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply this Perlex or roller gauze, as they call it. I may have them sit there and hold on to it. And so then tighten this down. Not super tight, but just enough to where there's a decent bit of pressure on it. And there is a way whenever you're rolling these two, if you unroll it, so if you throw it out there, I tell you what, it's gonna be like hard to be able to wrap this because it'll be long. You'll have to do this one of these. So it's better like you to use it as its roller gauze. So, whenever you can, so say this is enough, you can end up taping it, cutting it, and taping it. What I like to do, I actually like to just cut this, and these are really easy to slice down the middle, and then I can just be able to tie one side around the other side and just put a regular knot in it and then kind of leave it secured. I feel like it works a lot better than actual tape, just for the fact that it's secured together, and that tape will sometimes not adhere if it gets wet or whatever the case may be. But any questions about that? One thing for as well, I want to point out, you do not want to tighten this down so hard that you can end up causing some type of flow circulation to what's a distally or beyond this injury. So you want to get it just tight enough to where it's going to stop the bleed and it's maintaining it. So they always end up saying check a pulse motor sensory, and you can do that by, if you have we do what's called a capillary refill. So if you'll do with your finger, just take up the portion where you're adding some pressure. It's red whenever before you add pressure and it kind of turns white. And then once that turns back red, it's supposed to be less than 2 seconds. And that's that adequate capillary refill. So we want to make sure that that's how we're having some good distal pulses, and we're not including that circulation.
You just want to look cooler doing that and get you is really dangerous. Same principle, it has a little bit of padding there, and so we just wrap it. And then it has a little clasp that the gauze will go through. And we can tighten that up, and we can actually pull it back on itself and provide a little bit of pressure there. And at the end of it, it has a little clip, we can clip on the cell. So just if you're into cool stuff, way to go. So,
Absolutely. So will you guys ever come into contact with a patient that has a fracture or anything of that sort? Maybe possibly leg fracture or a fractured wrist. So that, these SAM splints are really good to be able to utilize with that. So let's say in one forearm, let's say he's got a fracture or some type of pain to about right here. So I can place it into a splint, you know, and I'm not going to harp on what type of splint to be able to place on. It's a boxer splint, a Volar splint, whatever. That's not necessarily what we're concerned about in this particular situation. We're just wanting to stabilize it. And patients, a lot of times, are people who have these injuries will automatically do that. They'll kind of hold on to it. They'll hold it right here close to them. And that's what this is being used for. So a way to be able to size boards with the opposite uninjured arm, so that way we can assess for the length. So we'll say, just for it's about right there, and I'm going to end up kind of placing it in this formation. So then I can end up making a divot to kind of follow a little bit. So that way it kind of falls into his wrist, form it to him. So I'm going to then place it on this other side. And then I can use that Curlex and wrap it around and secure it to him. Whenever you have a patient like this that, you know, you're wanting to be able to secure, it's obviously good to be able to hold it up. You can use a couple different things. You can use another set of roller gauze and just go across. That way they are able to kind of hold it up high. But say you're able to do that, and you have one of these triangle bandages. Now these will kind of trip you up if you let them. So you get a large triangle, you're going to end up kind of folding it on itself, and then so I would end up placing that tip in, go over the patient right here. And then I can be able to tie it. Whenever you do tie it, it will then sag pretty good. So you want to kind of tie it a little high to be able to secure it. So I want to tie that in. It'll be similar to that. So that's just one thing to be able to use.
So, like Carter said, a lot of times people are really good about splitting themselves, and so we kind of let them do that. If you're not going to have to move that patient anywhere, we'd rather them just split it themselves, because anytime you start to put a splint like this in one, you're going to, every time you move that extremity, they're going to tolerate pain. So if they can hold it themselves, let them do it. But if you're out in the middle of the wilderness and you're going to have to move them, that's handy. And you may not always have this type of equipment. Just use what you have at hand. Get a stick, measure it, and wrap it up, and use that if you need to do. Just something to keep that as still as possible. That's our goal in taking care of it. And then bleeding for just a second. The first tip is for when we have arterial bleeding, and this is when we cut into an artery and that blood is spurting out. And it's going to be pretty recognizable. You're going to notice that fairly quickly. And so that's a true life-threatening injury. So we want to stop that bleeding as quick as possible. So if you have a tourniquet like this, they're really easy to use. They're actually made for somebody to place on themselves without any assistance. We typically patient out a little bit to do that. So let's say Travis has got an arterial bleed down here on his arm. We're actually going to put the tourniquet up high so that if there's any other injuries there, we've taken care of it with one tourniquet. Worry about it there. So what we're going to do is put it high and tight. So I'm going to put the tourniquet on, wrap it on itself, and then right from the get-go, I want to get this as tight as I can. It should be a little bit uncomfortable at that point. And you have this windlass here. Turn this through. The windlass will twist this until the bleeding stops. That takes about 3 turns of the windlass. And it's got a little plastic piece that locks in its place right there. Put this on top of it. This extra piece, I can either put it under here, screw it into place, and tuck it out. It has place for time on it. That's really for if you're out in the field and it's going to take a while to get to the hospital. Other than that, I'm not too much about this. But this is designed to stop that bleeding. And really, if I put it on tightly, if I check his pulse, I shouldn't have a pulse in the lower part of his arm. And y'all wrap string around your finger until it turns purple. That's what we're doing here. And so if this extremity starts to turn colors, that's what we want to see. We want no blood flow for the tourniquet on down here. So turn colors, leave it on. Now it's painful. Because it's painful when you put this on, especially when you crank it down. With that process of tightening it down first, and then you'll adjust faster. Your fingers start throbbing for a while. Same thing happens with your extremity. And so let it know that it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to save its life. It's got a arterial bleed. Once we arrive on scene, we're going to leave the tourniquet in place, and we'll address the pain with a little suitable, make it a little comfortable. So anytime we see arterial bleeding, we'll go pretty straight to the tourniquet. Now, if you don't have a tourniquet like this, the first thing we do is direct pressure. When you have an arterial bleed, when we do direct pressure, we're doing serious pressure. So if his arm cares hurt, I'm going to dig my fingers into that and make that comfortable for him. I want to put as much pressure there to stop that bleeding as I can. And you can always fasten the tourniquet if you need to. It's not ideal, but that's where these training bandages come in handy sometimes. So when you first get them out of the package, so fold it up nice and neat. So what we'll do is wrap this around. And put a knot in it at the beginning. Make it a little bit easier on you. And then find something that we can put right there over that knot and then tie another knot over top of that. Use that as a windlass instead, whatever you have. Then you can, once we get that tightened down, you can either hold it or sign off. It's
You can see, those things are hurt quite a bit. And so you'll elicit quite a bit of stimulus from the patient. One, arterial bleed, anytime you get a secondary some type of artery, it's painful in itself. But yeah, when we place that, it'll really kind of shift that pain for sure. Well, let's talk about from the trauma stuff. So let's talk about allergic reactions. If that may be applicable to you, or do any of you have EpiPens, prescribed EpiPens, anything like that? Have children who do so? No, like just talk to me. Well, like being kind of an anaphylactic reaction.
They used to give me those when I got my body shots.
You have it. So have you had those experience? Oh, no. So we'll kind of go over this maybe a review for you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to train her, but I haven't actually tried to. I'm just give it to myself. So,
why don't you guys hit me with that?
Yeah, it's got a funny story. Whenever we were teaching one of the EMT classes, Mitch should use this and didn't let it know for the trainer. So he sits there and gives the whole procedure and says, all right, so I've got this blue piece. I'm going to take the blue piece off. That's the safety. I'm going to hold it. It's right from the side of my but then later told that it was a trainer. But that's how you're going to be able to give it. First, let's talk about the symptoms of which you didn't give this for some reason. So allergic reaction is going to be severe. Generally, somebody who has an EpiPen, they're going to have a previous allergic reaction to it. So say it's a wasp sting, a bee sting, or whatever the case may be. We will end up seeing some edema, some swelling, those are common things. You may see some hives associated. You may actually hear wheezing or what they call stridor, which basically their airway it started to close, and so it's causing a whistling sound whenever they're starting to breathe inside or breathe in. So these are real severe cases, and it causes a person to not be able to breathe because it's occluded, and then later go into cardiac arrest because we all need oxygen to be able to survive, right? So that's what the epinephrine is intended for, to be able to do so, to reverse it. So what we do here, take off the blue tip. We do not want to place our thumb over the top, even though there's no needle. Where the concern is that if somebody flips it over top, and that's kind of what they get used to, they can end up sticking themselves. And you can imagine that being an issue. So we're going to be placing it firm in our hand like this. And we're going to give it to the lateral thigh. And then we're going to hold on to it for 10 seconds. So that way all the medication can be administered. A concern for that you may have, so like I have a daughter who's 4 years old who has an EpiPen. And I can imagine if you're administering this to your child, they're going to want to move or anything like that. So make sure to be prepared for that. Stabilize that leg or make it to where they're not going to, moving intentionally because it can end up injuring them more so, right? We can give this through clothing. What's intended to do, so we don't necessarily have to leave the skin open or anything like that. Yeah.
That's great adrenaline, so, if anybody's ever jumped out and scared you, that's that feeling, it's gonna last a little bit longer than just that initial, but it's gonna, that you see with the anaphylaxis. And for whatever reason, we've noticed over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot more allergic reaction calls than normal. Only one of them was a true anaphylaxis with the epi and all that, for whatever reason. And that's the thing. When they first started doing the COVID vaccination here in town, they had a physician had a patient that was going into anaphylaxis, and so he handed the nurse the EpiPen, and the nurse said, I don't know how to use it, handed it back to the doctor, handed it back and forth a couple of times, and the doctor was like, okay, I'll use it, and he had to stop business in. That because I think it was fairly large and it can sticks out quite a bit, so that going bigger, that'll wake you up.
Is it typically given in the style?
In the thigh, yeah. Yeah, just find that large, and it's not an exact target, it's just somewhere up the side of the thigh. Do it, soften a lot of that medication disperse.
So that would get something. Repeat with inside your leg.
That's how they did it. So, but yeah, typically when somebody needs that again, they're not worried about the injection at all. And most of the time they're going to be able to do it themselves, but sometimes that reaction comes on so quickly that they're going to need some help with that. So that's that.
Question.
Yeah.
This is Oklahoma. We all know we have an issue here with drugs and overdoses and stuff like that and fentanyl. But could you use an EpiPen in a situation like that if you didn't have access to something and somebody was overdosed? Would you?
No.
No.
Just for allergic reactions, the only time it's really indicated for them. So this is a better drug for that, and that's what you were talking about. Any opioid, most of the opioid overdoses that we see in this area are still prescribed medications like oxycodone, Percocets, those types of prescribed medications. But we are seeing some heroin use, and they're mixing that with fentanyl, so it's a worrisome deal. There's tons of deaths nationwide because of opioids. And so Narcan is an opioid antagonist. So what happens is that opioid binds to pain receptors within the body and does a good job of taking care of the pain, but it also slows everything down to the point where their breathing slows down so much that it stops. And so what Narcan does, it competes for those receptor sites, and it comes along and knocks the Narcan off of those receptor sites. It does a really good job of that. So we give the Narcan, and it reverses the effects of the opioid. What we're looking for in somebody that's overdosed in opioids is somebody that's just out of it. At first they can barely keep their eyes open, they're falling asleep. And what we're looking for is when breathing slows down. Probably the more common drug in this area is methamphetamines, and those people have the exact opposite reaction to that drug. These people can't sit still, they're running around, all that. This does nothing for methamphetamines. So again, if you have to hold that victim down to give Narcan, it's not the right drug. Out of it when you give Narcan. And you can find these at all the behavioral health sites around. They'll give you Narcan for free. They'll ask you for some general information. They're not going to verify any of that information, so you put somebody else's name down, whatever you want to do. So the kit itself has some directions inside of it. Brand new box. But inside of it has the directions. Mark loves to talk about this because he talks about, you know, if you want to put this next to your toilet and read this when you get some time, you can read that. When you're in that situation, it's not the time to read this. Read that before you get there. And it has a little quick deal on the outside if you need a little refresher there. Inside the kit is 2 nasal applicators. So they're in a little blister pack. So when you see somebody that has potentially overdosed, we're going to open this up and get the applicator out. There's another set of instructions in here. But what we're going to do is take care of the patient. Now, if the patient's not breathing, the main thing that we need to be concerned with is their airway and breathing. The Narcan comes secondary to that. So open the airway, breathe for them if you need to, and then we're going to insert this into one of the nostrils. And it has a little press button there, and y'all can see when I push it, you know, it atomizes that medication, and it absorbs in the nasal mucosa, and so we squirt this up their nose. If we give this and they have not overdosed on opioids, no harm, no foul, nothing's going to change, but we're not going to hurt them if we give it. If they have ingested Narcan, what we hope is that they wake up. Now, be careful if, especially if somebody's been on opioids for a long period of time, when you take that high away from them really, really quickly, they can kind of fighting. So be careful of that. It's a good idea. We really recommend if you're in a situation, get some help there. There was a firefighter just last year, I think it was, that gave intranasal Narcan to a victim. The victim woke up and pulled a firearm and killed the firefighter. So first thing you want to do is make sure that you're safe. So if you're in a situation that you don't feel safe, back up, let other people get there first. But if you give the Narcan, step back a little bit because oftentimes they come up swinging. The intranasal type of Narcan, they typically wake up a little bit slower. Nausea and vomiting, it's not uncommon with this if they've ingested opioids. They tend to be a little bit. We give Narcan typically intravenously, and it works a lot faster, and we have more of that fact that I'm jumping up to fight us, and neither Travis or I, well, but so just protect yourself and give that. There's 2 applicators in here because sometimes that opioid lasts longer than the Narcan does. So we give one, and either they don't wake up fully, or they wake up and then they start to go down. We can do a second.
So does help at all with fentanyl?
It does, yeah. Fentanyl is it's a synthetic opioid, but this reverses that as well. They are starting to mix the fentanyl and the heroin with other drugs that are not affected by Narcan. So that's a scary deal in itself. And these people mixing these drugs, they're not brilliant scientists, right? So you never know what they're. And there was a lot of talk early on. There's another synthetic opioid called carfentanil, and it's a lot stronger than just regular fentanyl. And it comes in a powder form. And there was some information out there that if you came into contact with that with your bare skin, that you would overdose and die. That's typically not the case at all. Now, if you walk into an area, and y'all may be involved in cleaning up an area like that, I don't know, but if they're manufacturing fentanyl in a location, that's when I'd be worried about accidentally coming into contact with some type of reaction. But we still recommend using blood if you suspect anything like that. But never put yourself in a situation where you may be injured in that. Your safety trumps that patient's safety every day. So don't put yourself in that situation. I think add to that.
You would cover this, already, but we'll just kind of go over it one more time, is, whenever you give that intranasal, the intravenous that we give on the EMS is a lot quicker, right? So just be prepared that whenever you give that intranasal, it may take 8 to 10 minutes or so, let's say 5 to 10 minutes. So just know that the patient may not be breathing for that 5 to 10 minute period, if that is what the underlying cause is. So be prepared for that. If you can or do so, you can be able to intervene with that, kind of like what we talked about. If you have a patient that has a pulse, we could be able to do this rescue method. If it's something you chose such use or as applicable to you.
So if you have to do rescue breathing, just give a breath, count to 6, give a breath, count to 6.
So you would recommend doing CPR if they're unconscious, not breathing, can't feel a pulse.
If you're not sure whether they have a pulse still, yeah, start CPR. But if it looks like they're kind of moving around, they're just not breathing well on their own, then consider the rescue. Well, seizures, we kind of started talking about that briefly.
So we'll talk about seizures real quick. If you've ever had, anybody or come across anybody who has a seizure or a seizure-like history, it's kind of what we want to know first. But so say you have a patient that you know seeing around, or a person that isn't having some convulsive-like activity. That convulsive-like activity can be explosive to just kind of their arms and kind of do this tonic-clonic situation, or it could be a gray ball, including like their whole body. Really good space out there. The first thing that you want to do if they're standing is to kind of assist them down to a position where it's not going to hurt them. So if you get behind the pedal, as you would prepare for if you're doing that highway, they're going to assist them to the ground. Get them to a position where they're not ready to hurting themselves or getting injured. Once they're on the ground, you just want to keep things away from that may hurt them, or so because if they're moving erratically, hitting something, hitting their head, that's kind of the concern. But once they're done with the seizure, they're going to have a period called a post-signal period. And this period will last generally from 10 minutes up to 30 minutes. And there's some cases where it's been up to an hour or so. I would also ask the family too, if there was a history of seizures. Generally, if that's the case, if that is the case, they're going to really know how to handle this. They may have a rescue medication to be able to give the patient too. But once that's taken care of, they're going to be pretty altered. So you're going to want to roll them over to the side, and there's a technique of being able to do that when you move their arm, their head, leg. There's a technique to do it, but really what you're trying to do is roll them over to the side to keep from any type of saliva entering into the lungs, causing what's called aspiration. That can be a big issue and cause some breathing issues as the patient wakes up. But that's what we're trying to keep from this time. But that's really it when it comes to taking care of a seizure patient. Like I said, if they give that rescue medication, say if it's a kid, they give that a lot of times. It's usually given rectally. But it'll usually happen pretty quick where it stops those seizures. So just maintain the airway, make sure that the kid or the patient is not going to hurt themselves and not going to have a saliva that will go into the back of the lungs. Right?
Yeah. Sure. Common term for it is CDA. Has anybody ever been around somebody that's had a stroke? What those symptoms look like?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, it's scary.
I have a stroke.
Have you? Okay. Yeah. You want to share what that symptoms you had figured out?
Yeah, I have a really bad headache. This was from hitting my head.
Okay.
So yeah, I had really bad headache, was confused. I got to a point where I was having difficulty pulling money out of the ATM, something that you do on a regular basis. And Yeah, I checked myself into a hospital and finding out I was having multiple strokes, multiple parts of my brain. That afterwards, everybody was really thin. My mom loved it. She's a little heavier set. I kept complimenting her, kept throwing my dogs around, trying to feed them.
Yeah.
Had a hard time formulating sentences and understanding sentences. I did fully the left side.
Yeah.
My body wouldn't regulate temperatures. That was a really odd one. It was summertime and you're wearing sweats, standing outside, you know, yelling at squirrels, you have to get squirrels that are always
Yeah.
in my garden until the whole
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
But yeah, it's like 100 degrees and sweatpants and sweatshirts. So, yeah, strokes are, it affects everybody differently.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing with them. Not all the time do you see, you know, this drooping of the face. I didn't have that. I just had a really bad headache. So take any head injury very seriously, is my advice.
Yeah. And so anybody that can be susceptible to having a stroke, there's generally two types. There's the ischemic stroke where one of the blood vessels in the brain becomes occluded by some clot or something. And so part of the brain is now starved with oxygen. And that's why everyone's a little bit different because it depends on what part of the brain is affected, what kind of symptoms that they'll have. The other type of stroke is they may be bleeding in the brain. It's one of the blood vessels in the brain is ruptured and bleeding in the brain. And so the common symptoms that we see is that sudden weakness on one side of the body. So they weak on one side of the body. They have difficulty with speech. So they have difficulty with understanding speech. They may have that sudden severe headache. They often have trouble with vision, either double vision or they have what's called visual neglect, where the body can't interpret vision on one side of the body. They have problems with walking because of that lack of balance associated with it. So those are just kind of the common symptoms. So we do a simple test called the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Scale. Put it on a test, if I remember that. But we look at three things. We look at their speech. So we have them say simple phrases like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So we're listening for any sort of speech or any difficulty with speech whatsoever. We have them smile real big to see if there's any of that facial group. So smile if one side of the face doesn't smile like the other side, and that's a problem. And then the last thing we do is have them close their eyes, hold their arms out. If one side drifts down or if they can't lift up one side at all, that's a problem. We have them close their eyes because if we don't, sometimes they can kind of compensate for that drift. So just let them drift. If any one of those signs is present, then we'll consider it a stroke. So the quick scale that we can use to look at that. Those patients need to get to the hospital as early as possible. And it's important if you see somebody have those symptoms, kind of think about the time that those symptoms started, because the treatment is based on how long those symptoms have lasted. So give the last known well time and then get them to the hospital. If we get them there quickly enough, they can get medication to reverse the effects of the stroke, or go in and actually treat the clot inside the brain. So it's a real time sensitive issue. So get them to the hospital early. Call 911. The advantage of call 911 is we can notify the hospital that we're coming, and they tend to be a lot more prepared for that patient. We get them in to be a lot for that. Thanks.
Yeah. So we'll talk about heart attacks. So generally when somebody has a heart attack, or what was symptoms that you guys were aware of to associate with a heart attack?
Tight chest.
Yeah, tight chest pain. But they can also include a couple different other things too. That you know, it could be generalized weakness, or it could just be overall weakness, fatigue. It can be shortness of breath too. And if you get some women, they say over the age of 65, can actually have some symptoms that are, they seem more benign. So they can say belly, or like pain, like their epigastric area, that top of the stomach area. Or just generalized fatigue and weakness. Those are common things. And what's happening in those situations is there's a clot, kind of like what you would have with a stroke. There's a clot in the brain,
within the vasculature, but now there's a clot within the coronary arteries that are wrapped around the heart. And that's what's causing that chest pain. So you may have a few different symptoms that you can include into that. What's important whenever you have this is to be able to give medication that a lot of us will have at home. If we get that early, it's aspirin. I'll tell you real quick just about how aspirin works is what's occurred within the clot is there's an embolus or some type of free-floating clot went into the coronary arteries. That aspirin helps keep from those platelets that stick together. It just keeps them from sticking together any further. And early aspirin administration has proven to have a higher success rate or survival rate of patients who are having a heart attack or MI, whatever we may call it. So it's really important to be able to give that early. If you've been calling 911, a lot of times they'll instruct you to take 4 baby aspirin, which equates to 324 milligrams of aspirin. So if you've had that come across that family or whatever case, that experiences that chest pain, shortness of breath, you'll sometimes have pain that will radiate to an area as well, including like the jaw area before it goes down to their left arm. And then they end up feeling it to their through to their back in some cases as well. So that's how you would end up taking care of patients with that symptoms.
Yeah. Now, the same thing may occur in a stroke where you have a blood vessel that's occluded, but we don't recommend aspirin in the stroke because we don't know whether it's that type of stroke or they're bleeding in the brain. If they're already bleeding within their brain, we give aspirin. Now we've demonstrated the issue a little bit. So no aspirin for stroke victims. Diabetes, but we don't really have diabetes in this area. But it's a common problem that we see. So there's essentially 2 problems with diabetes. Either the sugar gets too high or it gets too low. If it gets too high, that tends to happen over days, not weeks. It's kind of a slow process. And so some of the common symptoms of that is excessive thirst, excessive hunger, urinating a lot. And the real problem with hyperglycemia is dehydration because the body tries to get rid of that excess sugar through urination. So they dump a lot of fluid and get dehydrated. But it tends to happen over a period of time. They can, if it gets so high, at some point they may go into diabetic coma where they kind of have an altered mental status or they go unconscious because of it. And with them, so that their skin is really dry, when you look at their eyes, they're kind of sunken in because of that severe dehydration. They tend to be breathing really fast and really heavy. And occasionally you can smell this, they produce these ketones and it has this fruity smell to it. Some people equate it to the juicy fruit gum. Smells quite that good. I'm not really into it, but I work with some medics that we'll walk into a house and they're like, this patient sugar's too high. Like I can't tell that, but and that is an emergency, but like I said, it takes days generally to happen. And so we'll want to get them to the hospital. But the real problem is when that sugar gets too low and that tends to drop very, very quickly. So these folks are typically taking insulin. Either they've changed their dose recently, they haven't eaten like they're supposed to, whatever the case may be, their sugar has dropped precipitously. And so what we see is, you also see those Snickers commercials where they say you're not acting right today. We'll see that. We've had like ministers that have preached for the last 30 years. They haven't said a curse word since they were a kid, and now they're cursing you like a sailor. You know, it's totally out of the ordinary or out of the to act that way. So we see that change in behavior that we can think about trying to give them some sugar of some sort. So if they're awake and they're able to swallow, we'll give them some type of sugar. If you have a birthday kit, you want to put something in there, the cake icing, the kind of the gel icing works really well. What we'll do is just put it in between their cheek and gum and let it absorb there. What we're trying to prevent is any airway problem with anything. So we don't really recommend, we'll see a lot of people using a big spoonful of peanut butter, which has sugar in it, But if that gets down in the airway, that's a real problem. So try to put something, or use liquids, orange juice, regular soda works well. What you get into them. But if they're so far, mental status that they can't swallow, we don't recommend putting anything in their mouth because then it just becomes an airway problem. So just call 911. We'll get there and give them some sugar intravenously. It's one of our favorite calls because the patient is simply unconscious. We push some sugar to the IV and wake up like that. Look at that, like we've done something. Yeah. But it's one of those calls that we get on. But if you can, give them some sugar. And it's nice to see, we've got several people in the office that have the little thing that they stick in the scan and it gives them an alert on their phone when it gets a little bit low. So it's nice to see that technology. That's good. It's where hopefully we can keep people from getting that low.
Yeah, I've been hit on the highway before, someone, sugar dropped and they passed out. The foot went to the floor and they just sat there with their head down.
Oh, no.
Smacked back of that dually.
But a bad day. But hopefully the technology will keep them from doing that. So what else can y'all think of? Any topics that you can think of?
Like 2 different types of diabetes.
Yeah, there's probably even described more than that. And typically, yeah, they're either insulin dependent diabetes, and a lot of those are that juvenile onset diabetes. And the pancreas, and then typically doesn't create any insulin or insulin, so they have to take insulin. And then you have people that tend to get diabetes later in life, and they're considered non-insulin dependent diabetics, and they typically take some type of oral medication to control their sugar. And so they tend not to drop their sugars as much as when they're taking insulin. Even those folks at some point may go on insulin because they can't control it through diet. That's the two. There are some folks that have a type of diabetes where their sugar just drops, and it's not, they're not taking anything, their sugar just drops. They have some problems. So if you know that they have history of that, the sugar drops, and we give them some type of sugar. What gestational diabetes? Yeah, they gave her metformin, and she takes it to this day. Is she really taking metformin? And it's not uncommon for them to remain diabetic even after pregnancy. So, how big was your baby? She was about 7. Those babies tend to be really large, not really pounders, What else? You think?
Expiration date.
It does. It does have an expiration date, but they've done studies and shows that they're good long after their expiration date. So if you have one, somebody's overdosed, I would still use it. I think it still do some good for them.
What about epigens?
They'll have an expiration date as well, and that's bad because those EpiPens are fairly expensive. They come down a little bit, they're still really expensive. So,
Would you say they're probably still good for a year, 2 months?
work, for the yeah.
So you wrote, I can't remember what movie it was, but they used the EpiPen on the guy that was like overdosed, like pounded him in the chest.
Yeah, fiction.
Okay.
Bring up the day, I think it's actually on our hand. Yeah. Yeah, we don't recommend that.
Yeah.
They don't let us look at it anymore either. We used to get calcium and epinephrine straight into the heart. We got into it a little too late for that. But I shake too much to try to put a needle in somebody's heart anyway. So, yeah.
That's why they get over the top and do it so fast.
Yeah. Anything else, Joe?
Snake bites.
Not a whole lot. It's not uncommon. Somebody, I believe somebody took a trip the other day, felt good. So it's not common, and most of the venous plasmopathy around here are really pretty benign. Don't seem to have any symptoms. If you see that, you just want to, if you know it's a venous snake, it's always best to take them in. The significant problem with that is anaphylaxis, slow, have an anaphylactic reaction. So it's good to get it checked out. They don't really recommend us doing anything for snake bite anymore. You kind of keep that injury site kind of lower than the heart to keep it from traveling up. But they don't recommend any type of constrictive band around it. They don't let us make it cut it and suck it out.
So you pour like whiskey on a wound, like alcohol, like is that a real thing? Sure, you got real that to do.
It's like it.
Clean, you all have to.
What we'll do, if there's a site, we'll draw a circle around it, or swelling, draw a circle around it so that they can watch to see if that's growing. So if you just want to do something, just follow her. That's the same place that I have right on, we're actually non-venomous bites, so we get there, the snakes there. Pretty funny. In fact, we had a guy pull up at the station, or somebody had him in the back of the truck, and they pulled him out there, and this guy's laying out. He's like, acts like he's out of it. So we got the snake in the back of the truck, and we looked at it with the garter snake. All right. He's like, kid. But occasionally, oh, okay. The rattlesnakes.
No.
Occasionally, I don't know. But I just stay away from.
Yeah, cotton nuts are good.
Yeah. I was watching a video yesterday, and I suppose they knew there was a snake or two under this fence, but they got a bucket under that fence, lifted it up, and there was a den of rattlesnakes. I don't think it was around here anymore, but there's 30 snakes under there. I don't mind snakes too much, but 30 is a little excessive. So, yeah. I would imagine 30 snake bites is worse than one. So, what else do you?
So let me ask one thing right quick about this birthday. Did you guys make up your own, you said? Because we had some kind of we bought a bunch of birthday kits from the food food supply and about $1 million. And all they got in them is like aspirin and,
Band-Aids.
yeah, antibacterial lotion, some of that vacuum spray.
Yeah.
And, and then to replace the stuff, and then you gotta buy it back from them, and it costs $1 million to put them up.
Yeah.
So the only thing that really is missing is on Band-Aids. Yeah, all the ibuprofens everybody's taking out. That's really the only thing that's missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
If you're
think-
cross paying for it, then knock yourself out. But to do your own, yeah, no, I would really recommend getting it commercially.
You can probably look on it here and find one that you're doing.
You could just be like.
Somebody that makes that, because we used to put them in the vehicles, when we would go out, but then we had to put them in the office now in a couple of places, 3 places. I think we put them in.
They're not bad, but they tend to have things in there we just never got to use that expire. Burns we didn't really talk about, but the big thing with burns is keep them covered. If it's a really small burn, we can put some cool water on it to keep it from burning or hurting. But a large burn, we don't recommend putting any fluid on that whatsoever. Don't put any burn spray on there. People used to say put butter on there, unless they're cooking the person.
Not potato, I've heard
The real worry with burns is, if you're putting them in the front of it. Yeah, but because the real worry with burns is infection. The burn itself doesn't typically kill the person. It's try to Unless if they're still smoldering or smoking, we'll put water on it to stop the burning process, but other than that, we'll get a sheet or some type of clean cloth and put that over the top of it. Keep it as clean as possible. We'll worry about the pain when we get there, and we'll give them some nice medication to deal with that, but we just keep them covered up. Yeah, help as quickly as possible.
Okay, so wait, one more question.
I like it.
No, it's really good. So how do you guys get out of your office, do the roundabout when there's an emergency? Because those cars are backed up for a mile.
Right, yeah, so if we're going to,
How do you-
Woodall, we just.
Oh, yeah, I see that. How do you get to downtown?
Otherwise, if we're going south, we'll dip down, Ball Hill to, there's a little cutoff that gets back to 82 that way. If we're going towards town, we may go that direction or go through, Garden Walk. That direction.
You got the apartment complex.
But we have,
I thought that was my secret.
we have another unit that's actually parked at the fire station over at South Ridge. It's kind of be on the other side of that. So we kind of are planning for those big delays and stuff. So, yeah.
They actually have a circle in the dirt now, so that's part of it.
Yeah. So one guy running it this morning, and she had running the middle of it.
Right. Well, it's good to see you on in person this time, so hopefully we get together again soon. Do some more of this. So y'all be safe out there. Take yourself first and foremost. Take care of the person after that. So most of us are pretty good at taking care of ourselves. Still keep that in mind.
Here's the thing we need to worry about now is heat.
Stay out of it. That's our recommendation.
Also, we don't have that on.
Right. Yeah. Think about that. So, but yeah, stay hydrated. If you see somebody with heat-related issues, if you get fluid in them, get them to a cooler environment. If they're really hot, if you touch their skin and it's dry and hot, cool them down any way you can. Put water on them as quick as possible. Fan them.
They're still on the counter.
A lot of places are. They were saying that it was gonna be Saturday before we would get ours on. We got it on Monday night, but we are right by the turnpike that they built that we didn't want. Just because, anyways, just a mile down the road, there's still. A little West Tulsa, we just got slammed with winds.
I can sleep when I'm cold, but I can't sleep when I'm hot.
Yeah.
You get like,
Neighbor sheds the back board. They're out of around. And I, house,
thank you guys. Okay.
I would like to.
Did anybody have anything else they want to talk about in the,
There.
HAZWOPER world? Maybe what you might want to see next time? If you come up with something that you think of, you might want to see next time, send it to me on email. Or let me know at the ITEC conference. We'll figure out something to get together for next time and maybe change it up. You don't want to watch those old videos that David had, people falling off the ladder. I mean, they're funny the first time, but after about 1,000 times you've seen them, you know that guy's gonna fall off. He's got a ladder on the truck and on top of another ladder. You know he's gonna fall.
Grandma said, "We'll get propane slide."
That'd be good. Well, let me play on your certificates now. That's before you run away for them. That's it. Won't happen.
And then I typed it up and I'm.
And that's 50 next day. It's pretty bad.
You see in the office, and we said, you see the. All the space off, kind of one.